Imagine an ancient family gathered around a small fire under a wide, moonless sky. Above them, countless stars shimmer in the cool air. Without any lamps or city lights to drown them out, the stars of that primeval night are brilliant beyond measure. The Milky Way arcs overhead as a glowing river of countless stars, a sight so vivid that it casts faint shadows on the ground. Under such a sky, richer and darker than most of us ever see now, one feels both the immense scale of the universe and a reassuring closeness to it. Each flicker above seems alive, part of a grand story unfolding in slow time. The world is hushed. Only the crackle of the fire and the distant call of night creatures accompany the celestial display. As the flames dance, a storyteller lifts a hand towards the heavens, tracing imaginary lines between the stars. In those flickering shadows and starlight, the very first stories of the cosmos are born. Under ancient skies, before the written word, and long before city walls rose from the earth, our ancestors wove tales from the patterns they saw above. Each bright dot of light became a character in a story, each cluster of stars a legend passed from old to young. Perhaps they saw a great hunter chasing his prey across the sky, or a wise old man watching over his tribe from a throne of stars. The night sky was a canvas of mystery, and early humans painted it with the brush of imagination. Even in the depths of prehistory, when language itself was young, the stars spoke to us, quietly, in a universal tongue of wonder and awe. For these first stargazers, the sky was both a clock and a map. The slow wheeling of constellations told them when the seasons would change, when the chill of winter would give way to spring's warmth, or when migratory herds would return. By watching the sky, they learned when to sow seeds and when to harvest, guided by celestial signs. They learned, too, the points of the compass from the sky. In the northern hemisphere, one star near the sky's center never seemed to set. Later ages would know it as Polaris, the North Star. By noting that this steadfast star always hung above the northern horizon, early travelers could orient themselves at night. Long before the magnetic compass, the stars themselves were a guide, ensuring wanderers could find their way home across featureless plains or trackless seas. The heavens offered direction, not only in the metaphorical sense of guidance for life, but literally a map by which to journey. But beyond its practical guidance, the sky was also a source of comfort and curiosity. In a world that could be uncertain and dark, the stars were constant companions. Night after night, those tiny lights appeared, reassuring in their permanence, yet tantalizing in their unreachable distance. It is easy to imagine a child in a fur cloak, thousands of years ago, gazing up in sleepy fascination as an elder whispers that the stars are campfires of the spirits, or eyes of ancestors watching from above. Long before the age of cities, people even raised stones and built monuments to track the heavens. On windswept plains and desert sands stand ancient circles of stone, aligned with striking precision to the movements of celestial bodies. At a site in the Sahara, stones were placed to mark where the sun rose on Midsummer's Day, and perhaps where certain stars would appear. An early calendar in stone for a community of cattle herders. Far to the north, in what is now England, massive stones at Stonehenge were carefully arranged so that on the summer solstice, the first sunlight would stream through and hit a central altar stone. We can imagine those Neolithic peoples gathering on that longest day of the year, rejoicing as the sunrise aligned perfectly with their monument. affirming that the heavens were in harmony with their world. These structures, built with immense effort, show that watching the sky and marking time by the cosmos was already a central concern even before writing or kingdoms. Across the world, separated by great distances and ages, people looked up at similar skies and found remarkably similar shapes. Perhaps a cluster of 7 faint stars reminded many of a group of sisters dancing hand in hand. A long, winding band of light, the Milky Way, might have seemed to some like a river in the heavens, carrying souls or divine boats. Different groups gave different names to the constellations that formed overhead, yet certain figures appear again and again. There is often a hunter, often a great bear or other animal, and often a hero's journey written in the stars. This suggests something universal, that the experience of a clear, starry night speaks to a deep part of the human spirit, one that loves stories and seeks patterns, even in the vast randomness of the cosmos. The Pleiades, those 7 tiny stars that dance together, became 7 sisters in Greek lore, 7 maids in Arab tradition, and 7 girls pursued by a bear in stories of the native peoples of America. Even Aboriginal Australians tell of 7 ancestral women chased by a man or spirit, echoing the same motif. It is astonishing to find similar star stories in cultures oceans and ages apart. This hints at a shared origin, a primordial tale carried in our collective imagination from a time when our ancestors were few and lived under one common sky. Such myths may be among the oldest told on Earth, passed down in endless variations, yet always returning to that little cluster of 7 lights and the tale they inspire. In a cave in Lascaux, France, painted by hands over 17,000 years ago, a ghostly bull gallops across a rock wall. Just above the bull's shoulder, a cluster of small black dots was carefully placed by those ancient artists. Some today wonder if those dots represent the Pleiades, the tiny cluster of stars often called the 7 Sisters, which even now appears in the night sky near the shoulder of the constellation of the Bull. If true, it means that tens of thousands of years ago, humans not only observed the stars, but recorded them in art, linking sky to earth in story and symbol. Whether or not this interpretation is correct, it fuels the imagination. In the dance of torchlight on a cave wall, one can picture early humans teaching their children about a celestial bull and a cluster of star sisters who forever follow him across the heavens. Such moments are the first glimmers of star lore, humanity's earliest attempts to understand and narrate the cosmos. Over countless generations, those whispered myths around campfires would grow into grander legends, and eventually into more systematic knowledge. As humans began to build villages and then cities, as they planted fields and domesticated animals, their relationship with the stars deepened. The night sky became not just a backdrop for tales, but a guide for civilization itself. With the advent of agriculture, knowing exactly when the rains would come or when the river might flood became a matter of life and death. And so our ancestors turned again to the dependable rhythms of the sun, moon, and stars to help them mark time. The yearly flood, the migratory patterns of animals, the cycle of growing seasons, all were mirrored in the movements of celestial bodies. The sky became a calendar and a sanctuary, a place where divinity might dwell and from which fate might be read. From these early communities emerged the first great civilizations, and with them, the first written records of the stories in the stars. Clay tablets, stone carvings, and papyrus scrolls began to capture what had long been passed down orally. We are fortunate that some of these records survive, allowing us to hear the echoes of ancient voices describing the wonders of the sky. They speak of gods and animals shining in the darkness, of cosmic rivers and heavenly battles, of an order and meaning that link the stars above to life below. And while each culture's star lore is unique, they all share that fundamental spark of wonder. Let us journey now, in our imagination, to a time when those first civilizations were new, when cities were freshly built under the stars, and priests and sages climbed temple steps in the dark, eager to watch the skies. Our voyage will carry us through the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, along the timeless Nile in Egypt, and across the vast expanse of ancient China. In each of these lands, beneath ancient skies, people gazed upward and found guidance, meaning, and comfort in the stars. Theirs were the early chapters in humanity's cosmic story, chapters filled with observation and myth, science and spirit intertwined. As we drift through these old worlds, let the quiet wonder that the ancients felt wash over us. We are connected to them by the same starry canopy, the same twinkling lights that once sparked their stories and now illuminate ours. The night sky, unchanging in its grand patterns, links us across millennia. With a calm mind and an open heart, we begin our journey under those ancient skies where the first stories in the stars were born. In the land between two rivers, where the Tigris and Euphrates wind through fertile plains, an ancient people built the first cities known to history. Here in Mesopotamia, warm desert winds blow under a velvet sky spangled with stars. On a still night, thousands of years ago, the silhouette of a towering ziggurat, a step pyramid of sun-baked bricks, rises against the darkness. At its summit, a few devoted watchers stand quietly, their robes stirring gently in the breeze. These are the priest astronomers of cities like Ur and Babylon. With careful eyes they observe the heavens, waiting for the first wink of a certain star or the slow rise of the moon. From this high perch above the sleeping city, they feel closer to the cosmos, as if they might touch the sky or whisper to the gods who wander among the stars. In Babylon, the most renowned of these temple towers was called Etemenanki, meaning House of the Foundation of Heaven and Earth. It stood as a monumental stairway for the gods, a symbolic mountain built of brick and bitumen. To ascend its steps was to bridge the gap between earth and sky. Down below, the reflection of heaven permeated daily life. The goddess Ishtar's sacred symbol, an 8-pointed star, was etched on walls and jewelry, a reminder of the Lady of the Heavens who guided love and war. The sun god Shamash was depicted as a radiant disk, and the moon god Sin as a gentle crescent. These icons, appearing on everything from temple reliefs to the cylinder seals that merchants pressed into clay, under Ishtar's star and Sin's crescent, kings and commoners alike felt the presence of the divine in the very fabric of their world. Every clear night, when they looked up, they saw those same symbols shining down in the actual stars, affirming that the gods were above, watching and weaving the fates of humanity. For the people of Mesopotamia, the night sky was alive with divine presence. Every point of light held significance. The brightest star that graced the twilight or dawn was Inanna, also known as Ishtar, the goddess of love and war. When that dazzling planet disappeared from the evening sky and later reappeared at dawn, they told a story to explain it. Ishtar, the queen of heaven, had descended into the underworld and bravely ascended again, bringing light back to the world. High above, the reddish sparkle of Mars, was Nergal, the god of war, burning with ruddy intensity, while golden Jupiter was Marduk, king of the gods, moving regally through the sky. The pale shimmer of Saturn was Ninurta, the patient deity of law and agriculture. Each visible planet was more than a wandering star. It was a deity acting out a cosmic drama each night. Against the backdrop of fixed stars, they saw patterns that became the earliest constellations known to humankind. One was the shape of a great bull, the bull of heaven, shining prominently in the winter sky. In their epic tales, when the hero Gilgamesh spurned the advances of the goddess Ishtar, she unleashed the mighty bull of heaven upon the world to punish him. The sky and the story reflected one another. The constellation of the bull of heaven, which we now call Taurus, rose each year, dependable and strong, much like the mythic bull that descended in wrath. Elsewhere in the heavens, they recognized a lion prowling among the stars, a heavenly scorpion with its tail curved, and great twins standing side by side. These starry figures, the lion, the scorpion, the twins, were among the patterns their eyes picked out in the stellar blaze. Over generations, Mesopotamian scribes began to record these constellations on clay tablets. The earliest star catalogues from these lands, written in cuneiform over 5,000 years ago, list names of stars and groups of stars: the lion, the bull, the scorpion, the great twins, the sheaf of grain, the hero, and many more. It was as if they were mapping the celestial realm, giving structure to the sparkling chaos of the night. Even a tiny spray of faint stars that appears together, the cluster we call the Pleiades, was noted by these early astronomers. They sometimes simply called it the stars, a special group of 7 lights shining as one. To them, it might have represented 7 divine figures, or 7 sages, forever keeping each other company in the night. On those tablets, we also find something remarkable: the first known record of the zodiac. The zodiac was a band of the sky through which the sun, moon, and planets travelled. Essentially, the path along which the sun makes its yearly journey, divided into sections. The Babylonians observed that as the sun moved through the year, it passed in front of one familiar constellation after another, cycling through a dozen such star groups in turn. In time, they divided this band into 12 equal parts and assigned each part a constellation that dominated that portion of the ecliptic. Many of the constellations anchoring these 12 segments are the same ones known today: the bull, the twins, the lion, the scorpion, and so on. To the people of Mesopotamia, this celestial wheel was imbued with deep meaning. Each segment's rise and fall aligned with seasonal changes and carried omens for human affairs. As the sun stepped into the cluster of the lion, for instance, it heralded the scorching heat of midsummer. The return of the bull in the east presaged the spring planting season. For example, when the constellation of the scorpion rose in the evenings, everyone knew the fiercest heat of summer was peaking and the harvest time approached. The scorpion's celestial tail appeared to curl in triumph at the culmination of the sun's journey. Later in the year, as the figure of a man pouring water, what we now call Aquarius, ascended in the night, it coincided with the cooler months and much-needed rains, a heavenly water-bearer, bringing relief to the land. Their creation stories even wove the stars into the fabric of the universe. In one Babylonian epic, after the god Marduk defeated the forces of chaos, he set about ordering the cosmos. It is said that Marduk hung the stars in the sky as markers and fixed the zodiac in place to define the course of time. He appointed the year and marked off its divisions, placing 3 bright stars as guardians for each of the 12 months, thus laying out a heavenly calendar for the world. Through myth and observation alike, the message was clear: The heavens held an order, a pattern bestowed by divine hands, which made life on earth understandable and predictable. From the tops of their ziggurats, those massive mountains made by human hands, the sky-watching priests would note the first appearance of Venus at dawn, or the conjunction of the moon with a particular star. They tracked the cycles of the moon with precision, marked the months, and intercalated extra months when needed to keep the calendar aligned with the agricultural year. By noting where along the horizon the sun rose each day, they could anticipate the coming of solstices and equinoxes, the turning points of the yearly cycle. All of this knowledge was carefully recorded on clay for future generations, forming a repository of astronomical wisdom. Yet Mesopotamian star lore was never merely about science or timekeeping. It was also a form of divination and a connection to the divine. The people believed that the gods used the movements of the heavens to communicate with those on earth, sending messages through eclipses, comets, and the wanderings of planets. A sudden eclipse of the moon on an unlucky day, or a halo ringing the sun, could send priests scrambling to interpret its meaning for the king. Imagine a royal court in the city of Akkad as night falls, and a full moon rises coppery red in eclipse. The king stands on a palace balcony, looking uneasily at that dimming moon. Below, the city is quiet, but an unnatural dusk has crept over the sky as Earth's shadow covers the lunar face. The king's advisors, consulting their tablets of omens, whisper that this eclipse is a warning, perhaps of looming conflict or the gods' displeasure. In response, the king might perform special purifying rituals, or even appoint a stand-in substitute king for a day to absorb any curse, all in an effort to appease the heavens. Such was the power the stars and sky held over the minds and decisions of those ancient rulers. Night after night, year after year, generations of scholars in Mesopotamia continued to observe and record. Over time, their understanding grew amazingly precise. By the later Babylonian period, astronomers could predict the movements of planets and the timing of eclipses with surprising accuracy, using only simple arithmetic and centuries of observations. They knew, for instance, the cycle of Venus's appearances and disappearances, and they compiled guides to anticipate when Venus would next rise as the morning star after months of invisibility. This reliability only reinforced their sense that the cosmos was a grand clockwork of divine design. The regularity of the sky was, to them, a comfort and a proof that their gods maintained order against the forces of chaos. We can almost picture those ancient scholars in the last glow of a desert sunset, waiting for the first stars to prick the sky. Perhaps an older priest, with a lined face and patient eyes, points out to his young apprentice the faint spark of Mercury near the horizon. In a soft voice, he recounts the significance. That is Nabu, the messenger of the gods, he might say, naming Mercury after the divine scribe. Overhead, the bright planet Jupiter, Marduk's star, gleams among the stars of the crab or the lion. The priest notes its position on his clay tablet, comparing it to records from years past. There is a slow, methodical joy in this work, a reverence that infuses the quiet exchanges between teacher and student. They are reading the sky as one reads a sacred book, line by line, night by night. Beyond the cities, out on the open steppe, a shepherd, watching his flock at midnight, might lift his eyes to the same constellations. He could navigate by them if need be, or simply pass the long hours by recounting the star myths he learned as a child, each tale keeping him company as faithfully as his herd dog by the fire. In the streets below, ordinary people also felt the influence of the stars. They watched some constellations loom large and bright in certain months, then fade away for a time. They navigated their calendars by the sky, for example, knowing that when the constellation of the Great Dog sank in the west at dawn, the hottest days of summer had arrived. Parents would pass to their children the names of the stars and the legends attached to them, perhaps pointing out a pattern and calling it the wagon, or telling of a heroic figure eternally pursuing the sky bull across the heavens. These stories comforted them and gave meaning to the vast unknown overhead. When times were troubled, say, a drought gripped the land, or a comet unexpectedly appeared with its tail stretched across the stars, people turned anxious eyes skyward, hoping for reassurance or answers. And if a brilliant shooting star suddenly streaked across the night, many a person must have paused in awe, wondering which god had sent that fiery omen and what it meant for their lives. Life in ancient Mesopotamia was intimately tied to cosmic rhythms. The great rivers would flood and recede, crops would be sown and reaped, kings would rise and fall, and above it all, the stars would wheel on regardless, eternal and serene. The connection between heaven and earth was deeply ingrained in the Mesopotamian worldview. They saw themselves as living under a cosmic canopy filled with divine signs. A phrase from a Babylonian text proclaims, "Sky and earth both produce portents. Though appearing separately, they are not separate, for sky and earth are joined." This was the essence of their star law, the conviction that the patterns in the sky reflected the patterns of life on earth, bound together in a single fabric by the gods. As we drift through this Mesopotamian night, in our mind's eye, the stars above seem to shimmer with stories. You can almost hear the faint echo of a temple hymn being chanted under the stars, praising Ishtar or Marduk or Sin the moon god, thanking them for watching over the city. The lights of hearth fires in mud brick homes glow faintly below, like fallen stars mirroring the sky. The priests atop the ziggurat roll up their tablets as the night deepens, satisfied that the heavens are proceeding as expected. In a few hours, the morning star will rise, and life will begin anew. And so it has been, they believe, since the very beginning of time. Gently now, our journey carries us onward, leaving the land of Mesopotamia with its ziggurats and starlit mysteries. The tapestry of the night sky unrolls above us like a scroll, guiding us westward over mountains and deserts to a different land defined by another great river. The constellations shift slowly as we travel. New stars climb the eastern horizon while others set behind us. We find ourselves gliding above a dark, silvery ribbon in the desert, the Nile, where another ancient civilization flourished under the gleam of Sirius and Orion. The story of the stars continues here, in the realm of pharaohs and pyramids, where the heavens were charted not on clay tablets, but on temple walls and in the very corridors of tombs. Dawn is approaching along the Nile. The eastern sky has faded from black to deep blue, and a thin band of gold begins to shimmer on the horizon. In this still, expectant moment, a group of Egyptian priests stands on the flat roof of a temple, eyes trained toward the east. For 70 days the bright star they await has been invisible, lost in the sun's glare. But now the time has come. A tiny spark pierces the twilight, a single star twinkling just above the horizon where the date palms stand in silhouette. One of the priests lets out a soft cry of joy and points. Others press their palms together in reverence. It is the star Sirius, known to these priests as Sopdet, rising for the first time this season. Its appearance, just before sunrise, heralds the flooding of the Nile and the advent of a new year in their calendar. In villages up and down the river, farmers and families will soon awaken to this news. Sopdet has returned, and with her, the promise of life-giving waters. To the ancient Egyptians, this annual event, the heliacal rising of Sirius, was both practical and profoundly sacred. Sirius was not merely a distant sun, it was the embodiment of a goddess. They pictured Sopdet as a divine woman with a 5-pointed star upon her head, radiant and eternal. In later eras, they associated her with Isis, the great mother goddess, whose tears of grief for her slain husband Osiris were said to cause the Nile to flood each year. Thus, the rising of Sirius Isis was like the arrival of a celestial queen, bringing renewal to the land. When that first glittering light was seen in the dawn sky, it meant the Nile's inundation was imminent. The river would soon swell and spill rich silt across the farmlands, ensuring crops could be planted for another cycle. It was the cornerstone of Egypt's prosperity and survival, all timed by a single star. Little wonder that the Egyptians marked their new year from this moment. They called it the opening of the year, and it was celebrated with gratitude and hope, as people gave thanks for the reliable return of both the star and the floodwaters. The order and regularity of the cosmos were of supreme importance in Egypt. This was a society that valued Ma'at, the principle of cosmic harmony, truth, and balance. They believed that as long as Ma'at was upheld by the pharaoh and the people, the sun would continue to rise each day, the Nile would flood in its season, and the stars would maintain their eternal courses. The sky in Egypt's imagination was not just a random scattering of lights. It was a well-regulated kingdom, much like Egypt itself, with the sun, god Ra, as the daily ruler, the moon as a nightly guardian, and the stars as a multitude of lesser deities, all playing their part in the grand design. The Egyptians did not look to the heavens primarily for unpredictable omens of doom. Rather, they saw in them a reflection of stability and divine wisdom. On most nights, the stars marched across the sky in reassuring order, just as the seasons followed their appointed times. When rare events did occur, an eclipse for instance, or an unusually bright comet, it was noted with awe and recorded by temple astronomers, but within a worldview that assumed the fundamental reliability of the universe. When Egyptians gazed up at the night, they envisioned their gods and goddesses among the stars. Overhead arched the body of Nut, the sky goddess. In their art, Nut is depicted as a woman stretching across the heavens, her skin dark blue and spangled with stars, fingers and toes touching the horizon in each direction. Every evening, Nut was said to swallow the blazing sun, and each morning she gave birth to it anew, a cycle of death and rebirth enacted in the sky every day. The stars sprinkled across Nut's body were considered lamps or souls. Some said the twinkling lights were the spirits of the blessed dead, glinting on her form like jewels on a velvet canopy. Others imagined them as tiny fires carried by gods rowing celestial boats. Indeed, the Milky Way itself was viewed as a divine waterway, sometimes called the Nile of the sky, and along this river the sun and stars sailed in boats during their passage through the night. Among all the constellations in their sky, one of the most significant was a figure we today recognize as Orion. To the Egyptians, this wasn't a hunter, but the image of Osiris, god of the afterlife and resurrection. They named this constellation Sahu, and saw in its stars the outline of their beloved god, eternally striding across the sky. Just behind Orion's bright stars follows Sirius, the stellar manifestation of Isis. Night after night, Orion Osiris and Sirius Isis chase each other across the heavens, reflecting the sacred story of the goddess who searches for her lost husband and restores him to life. To the Egyptians, this was more than poetry. It was proof that the pattern of their mythology was woven into the cosmos itself. Osiris had triumphed over death and taken his place in the sky as a beacon of hope that life renews itself. The stars showed it to be so. Each year, Orion would vanish in the sun's glare, just as Osiris entered the realm of the dead, only to reappear later, and Sirius would vanish and return as well, heralding the resurrection of the land through the Nile flood. The cyclical drama of their mythology was mirrored perfectly in the movements of the celestial bodies above. Not all the star groups the Egyptians saw correspond to the constellations we know from Greece or Mesopotamia. They had their own set of star figures, some of which remain mysterious to us now. For example, they saw a grouping of stars as a maned lion prowling the sky, another as a reclining cow, perhaps tied to the goddess Hathor, and another as the foreleg of a bull. That foreleg, an unmistakable shape in their northern sky, was often identified with Set, the god of chaos, as if this starry bull's leg was a tether in the sky restraining Set's destructive powers. High in the north, the Egyptians observed that some stars never set at all. Night after night, year after year, the stars near the celestial North Pole circle around and never dip below the horizon. The Egyptians called these the imperishable stars, the undying ones. To them, these ever-visible stars were a celestial realm of eternity, a fitting destination for souls who had triumphed over mortality. In their funerary texts, pharaohs prayed to join the imperishable stars, believing that there, in the unending circuit around the pole, they would live forever among the gods. In a pyramid text, a deceased pharaoh proclaims, "I will ascend to the sky and become one of the imperishable stars that never die." To the Egyptians, this was not mere poetry, but a literal aspiration. A priest might point toward those circumpolar lights and whisper to a young apprentice, "Look there. See how those stars never slip under the horizon? That is the place of eternity. There the king shall live, never disappearing, just like those lights." And indeed, anyone camping under the Egyptian night could watch those northern stars circling endlessly and feel the promise of an afterlife undimmed by time. This belief in a stellar afterlife influenced some of Egypt's most impressive architecture. The Great Pyramids of Giza, massive, triangular mountains of stone, were more than royal tombs. They were vehicles for transformation. Deep within the Great Pyramid, narrow shafts were engineered to run from the burial chamber to the outside, aimed precisely at certain stars. One shaft pointed toward the northern sky, targeting the region of the imperishable stars. Another was aligned with the belt of Orion in the southern sky. It is an astonishing thought. The builders of the pyramid aligned these dark tunnels so that the soul of the deceased pharaoh, released during burial rites, could soar directly toward the stars of Osiris and the circumpolar heavens. In the silent darkness of the pyramid's heart, one can imagine the newly departed king's spirit flying like a falcon through the shaft, out into the clear night, guided by those celestial beacons toward its eternal home. The stars were both compass and promise, a compass for the journey of the soul and a promise of immortality. Astronomy and architecture intertwined in other ways as well. Egyptian temples were often oriented to points of rising or setting heavenly bodies on key dates, effectively turning entire buildings into giant instruments of alignment. At the Temple of Amun-Ra in Karnak, for instance, the main avenue is oriented so that on the midwinter solstice, the rays of the rising sun shoot straight down the temple's central axis, illuminating the sanctuary. This precision reflects a worldview where earth and sky were in harmony, with temples serving as stone calendars and observatories. Likewise, there were temples dedicated to Isis, Sopdet, where ceremonies were held when Sirius first rose each year. The temple gateways were positioned to frame that first gleam of the star at dawn. We can picture the moment, a temple dark and empty for months, waiting. And then on that special dawn, the shrine is suddenly pierced by the light of Sirius, flooding the aisle, as if the goddess herself has arrived. The Egyptians were also meticulous timekeepers using the stars. Long before mechanical clocks, they devised a system of star hours. They identified 36 star groups, or decans, that would rise in succession through the night, each marking an hour as the earth turned. By knowing which decan was rising, or culminating at a given moment, priests could tell the time in the dark hours with remarkable accuracy. They painted these star clocks on the insides of coffin lids and on tomb ceilings, so that the departed could continue to tell time and navigate in the next world. In the tomb of the pharaoh Seti I, for example, the ceiling is adorned with a magnificent celestial diagram, a map of the heavens showing constellations, planets, the path of the sun and moon, and the decanal stars. Tiny figures of gods and symbols accompany the star groups, each hour of the night represented by a deity or a sacred emblem. This beautiful artwork was not merely decoration. It was a guide for the soul, a reminder that the cosmos was law, governed and knowable, even in the realm of the dead. For the average Egyptian tilling his field or fishing in the Nile, the sky was no less relevant. They marked the seasons by the stars as well. They knew, for example, that when Orion began to rise before dawn, the cool winter season was coming, time to harvest certain crops. When Orion vanished into the glow of sunset, the heat of summer was near. The star we call Aldebaran, a red star in Taurus, was observed as a herald of the desert's heat. Its annual first appearance in the morning sky came when the sun's power was strongest, scorching the land. Out in the western desert, nomadic tribes used the stars for navigation, just as sailors did at sea. And of course, every year without fail, the entire population looked for Sirius in the dawn. Rich or poor, all depended on the Nile's flood, and so all watched for that star. One can imagine on that special morning, people stepping out of their mud brick houses at first light, scanning the pale eastern sky. And when they finally saw that tiny light of Sirius blinking, they knelt or clapped or simply smiled, knowing the great river would soon rise and bring abundance once again. Under the Egyptian sky, life and death, agriculture and myth, kingship and divinity were all bound together by the stars. The calm, predictable motions of the heavens were a comfort, evidence that the cosmos had an order that human beings could depend on. The pharaoh, they believed, was the earthly guarantor of that order, ruling with the approval of the gods so long as he upheld Ma'at. In turn, the heavens affirmed his right to rule by keeping the celestial clockwork on time. If the stars ever failed to appear, or the sun refused to rise, it would mean Ma'at had been lost, a catastrophe beyond imagining. But in thousands of years of Egyptian civilization, such chaos never came to pass. The skies remained true. The Egyptians saw this as proof of the righteousness of their world, that the gods were content and balance was being kept. Now our journey carries us further onward, drifting away from the green banks of the Nile and the towering monuments bathed in starlight. The soft chorus of frogs and night birds along the river fades as we rise higher and head eastward. The stars above wheel gently. The familiar pattern of Orion tilts toward the western horizon behind us. Ahead, new constellations come into view, different arrangements of stars that once guided yet another ancient people. Beyond endless mountains and deserts, in the far reaches of the east, lies the old land of China. There too, beneath ancient skies, wise men and women studied the stars and found myth and meaning in their patterns. The night air grows cooler as we imagine ourselves descending toward a distant Chinese kingdom, where an emperor awaits heavenly signs and astronomers trace the patterns of the cosmos in service of their land. The night sky above ancient China was regarded with a unique mixture of reverence and vigilance. In the royal observatory of the emperor's palace, a pair of astronomers in long silk robes stands under the stars. It is a clear, cool evening, and the entire vault of heaven twinkles above them, a testament to cosmic order and beauty. One astronomer gently turns a bronze instrument, aligning it with a bright star near the north. This is the pole star, the North Star, shining steady and fixed in the same spot every night. To these sky watchers, that star is nothing less than the celestial emperor, the pivot of heaven. Around it, countless lesser stars wheel in circles each night, just as, on Earth, all subjects revolve around the throne of the emperor. The astronomers note the North Star's position and then trace the outline of the stars around it, an area they call the Purple Forbidden Enclosure, a heavenly palace in the sky. Within its boundaries lie starry figures they name for palace gates, royal treasuries, and noble courtiers, mirroring the imperial court on Earth. Thus, the heavens themselves are imagined as a grand cosmic kingdom, with the North Star as the sun of heaven above, and every flicker of light a member of his celestial bureaucracy. On this night, a faint band of light streaks across the sky, the Milky Way, arching from horizon to horizon. Chinese poets call it the Silver River. They tell a story that this shimmering river of stars is actually a celestial stream separating two lovers. On one side of the river, a tiny star shines softly. This is Jinu, the weaving maiden. And far across the glowing band, another star twinkles. Niulang, the cowherd. Long ago, the tale goes, Jinu was a divine being, a daughter of the heavens, who wove the beautiful coloured clouds of the sky. She came down to earth and fell in love with a mortal cowherd, Niulang, and for a time they lived happily as husband and wife. But when the Queen of Heaven discovered this forbidden union between immortal and human, she was furious. With a sweep of her hairpin, she scoured a great river in the sky to forever separate the two lovers. And so the Silver River, the Milky Way, flowed between them, and they became the stars, Vega, Jinu, and Altair, Niulang, visible on opposite sides of the celestial river. Once each year, on a summer night, the legend says a bridge of magpies forms across the Milky Way, allowing the weaver and the cowherd to meet for just a few precious hours. This gentle story, told on starry summer nights to generations of children, imbues the heavens with romance and longing. Even today, during the 7th night of the 7th lunar month, the Qixi festival, families gaze up at the sky and remember the weaver girl and the cowherd, hoping to catch a glimpse of the star-crossed lovers and the fleeting bridge of birds. Such myths reveal how deeply the Chinese felt connected to the stars, not only as scientific objects of study, but as characters in an unfolding celestial drama. Yet alongside these tender tales, there was a very serious aspect to Chinese star lore, the concept of the mandate of heaven. In China, it was believed that heaven, Tian, and earth were inextricably linked. The emperor ruled as the son of heaven, and his right to govern, his mandate, was granted by celestial decree. This mandate was not unconditional. It depended on the emperor's virtue and the harmony of his reign. If he ruled justly and upheld order, heaven would bless the land with prosperity. The seasons would be favorable, rains timely, and the realm at peace. But if he faltered, if corruption or cruelty took root, then the heavens would send warning signs. Those warnings often came in the form of astronomical phenomena. A comet, with its fiery tail spreading across the sky, might be read as an omen of impending disaster or dynastic change. A series of earthquakes or floods, paired with an unexpected eclipse, could be interpreted as heaven's profound displeasure with the current ruler. Even in the most ancient legends, the act of aligning earthly life with the heavens was portrayed as a sacred imperial duty. Chinese lore recounts that the wise Emperor Yao, who reigned in hoary antiquity, commanded his astronomer sages to chart the skies and perfect the calendar. Yao dispatched these learned men to the far corners of his realm, one to the eastern sunrise, one to the southern tropics, one to the western mountains at sunset, and one to the northern darkness, so that no star or season would escape their notice. Under their careful watch, it is said, the solstices and equinoxes were determined, the seasons arrived as expected, and the people flourished in harmony. This myth, passed down through millennia, reflects a deep truth. From the very start, good governance in the Chinese mind was linked to knowing the will of heaven and keeping time with the cosmos. Because of this cosmic relationship, Chinese astronomers carried a heavy responsibility. They were not merely stargazers, they were guardians of the throne's legitimacy, the intermediaries between heaven and the imperial court. In the silence of each night, they kept watch for any irregularity in the sky. If a new star appeared, what we now call a nova, or if a broom star, comet, suddenly streaked into view, they would swiftly record it on bamboo slips or silk, noting its position among the constellations and its colour and form. These observations were reported at once to the emperor. Imagine an ancient scene in the Forbidden City. A weary astronomer kneels before the emperor at dawn, having spent the night tracking a blood-red comet. He presents a scroll with his findings, and heart-pounding, explains that this comet has entered the section of sky associated with the imperial palace constellation. The court falls silent, knowing that according to the old texts, such a portent could foretell rebellion or illness or some great upheaval. The emperor's face remains composed, but he later orders acts of supplication, perhaps a general amnesty, lavish offerings to the ancestors, or prayers at the temple of heaven, to avert heaven's wrath. Such was the delicate dance between the throne and the stars. Indeed, Chinese chronicles tell of remarkable omens. Around 1059 BCE, as the virtuous King Wu of Zhou prepared to overthrow a corrupt dynasty, the 5 visible planets gathered tightly together in the night sky, all aligned in one small section of heaven. Such a rare conjunction was seen as heaven's clear signal that a great change was at hand. The mandate of heaven was passing to a new, righteous ruler. This celestial spectacle, 5 wandering stars in near unison, must have astonished all who saw it, and it was forever linked with the dawn of a new era on earth. One of the earliest and most famous cautionary tales illustrating the gravity of an astronomer's duties is the legend of Shi and He. Over 4,000 years ago, during the reign of Emperor Chongkang, as the story goes, these two men served as court astronomers. They were expected to observe the skies with utmost diligence and warn the emperor of any eclipse, for a solar eclipse was considered a dire omen that the natural order was disturbed. But Xi and He neglected their duties. Some say they indulged in wine on the day an eclipse was due. And so, when the moon's shadow crept across the sun unexpectedly, the empire was caught unprepared. Daylight dimmed into an eerie twilight. Birds grew confused and began roosting, and people panicked at the sight of the sun being devoured. The emperor, enraged that his astronomers had failed to predict and prepare rituals for this event, ordered their execution as a stern lesson. Whether historically true or not, the tale underscores how vital astronomy was to governance in ancient China. To fail at reading the heavens could be literally a capital offense. From early times, Chinese skywatchers divided the heavens into constellations very differently than their counterparts in Mesopotamia or Greece. Instead of a few large figures, they used many smaller patterns, eventually over 280, dotting every corner of the sky with meaning. There were three main regions in their celestial map, the three enclosures. One we have already encountered, the purple forbidden enclosure around the North Star, home to the circumpolar constellations symbolizing the emperor's domain. The other two enclosures were the Supreme Palace enclosure and the Heavenly Market enclosure, which covered other sections of the northern sky. Scattered outward from these were the 28 mansions, a ring of constellations along the path of the moon and planets, akin to the zodiac, but divided into 28 segments rather than 12. Each mansion was a small constellation that marked the moon's nightly progress through the month and also partitioned the sky for astrological interpretations. They had succinct names like Horn, Room, Heart, and Willow, among others, though the meanings of some have become obscure with time. On any given night, one mansion would be rising in the east, while another set in the west. In this way, the Chinese could keep a fine-grained calendar of the year by noting which star groups rose just before sunrise. This system also aided navigation and timekeeping. A traveller or sailor who recognized a mansion overhead at dusk could discern the approximate date and direction, the sky serving as a rotating almanac. The four cardinal directions and seasons were represented in the sky by four great celestial creatures formed by these mansions. In the east reigned the azure dragon, Qing Long, unfurling across the spring stars. In the south soared the vermilion bird, Ju Ke, shining in the summer sky. In the west prowled the white tiger, Bai Hu, amid the stars of autumn. And in the north coiled the black tortoise, Xuan Wu, often depicted entwined with a snake, dominating the winter heavens. Each of these mythic beasts was not a single constellation, but an amalgamation of many stars and smaller constellations, a whole region of the sky designated as the realm of that creature. These four were central to Chinese cosmology, symbolizing not just star patterns, but fundamental forces and cyclical changes. When the dragon rose, spring rains would follow and seeds would sprout. When the bird stood highest, summer heat and growth were at their peak. When the tiger took its turn in the night sky, autumn brought the harvest and turning leaves. And under the watch of the tortoise, winter's stillness and dormancy prevailed. Looking up on a clear night, an ancient Chinese observer could identify these divine beasts among the stars and feel secure that the cosmic order was intact. The guardians of the four directions were in their places, overseeing the progression of the seasons. Chinese astronomers achieved remarkable precision in their observations. By the 4th century BCE, astronomers like Shi Shen and Gan De were cataloguing stars and recording the motions of planets. They noted the regular dance of the 5 planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, which they called the 5 Wanderers, correlating each with one of the 5 elements: water, metal, fire, wood, earth, and the 5 directions: north, west, south, east, and center. Jupiter, the planet with a 12-year cycle through the stars, was associated with wood and the east. Its slow journey through one constellation each year helped define their traditional zodiac of years, the cycle behind their 12 zodiac animals. Historical records show calculations of planetary periods and careful notes on conjunctions and eclipses. One ancient astronomer recorded that Mars disappeared behind the Moon during an eclipse, a conjunction modern astronomers can verify, confirming the meticulous accuracy of those observations from long ago. By the Han Dynasty, around 2nd century BCE to 2nd century CE, Chinese star catalogues listed hundreds of stars in dozens of constellations. They built instruments such as bronze armillary spheres, intricate models of the celestial globe with rings for the equator and ecliptic, to simulate the motions of heavenly bodies for teaching and prediction. One can imagine a scholar in a flowing robe gently spinning the concentric rings of an armillary sphere as he demonstrates how the sky turns around the pole star each night. They also erected observation towers and used sighting tubes and water clocks to time the transits of stars across the meridian. In some cities, tall gnomons, upright pillars, were set up to measure the noonday sun's shadow throughout the year, an ancient technique to determine solstices and the calendar's accuracy. All this reflects a civilization deeply invested in understanding the cosmos, both for practical governance and for the pursuit of knowledge itself. Daily life in ancient China, as in other agrarian cultures, was also regulated by the sky. Farmers looked to the stars to know when seasonal rains might arrive, or when to begin planting and harvesting. An old Chinese saying advised, "When the handle of the dipper points straight down at dusk, the ploughing time has come." This refers to the Big Dipper's handle, which indeed changes its orientation with the seasons. In mid-spring, the dipper's handle points downward in the northern sky in the early evening, a signal that spring planting should be underway. In autumn, the handle points upward, like a ladle raised to pour out the last of the harvest. Thus even those who never studied in the Imperial Academy could read the open book of the night sky in their own way. Fishermen along the coasts navigated by the stars at night, knowing which star hung above their home port and which pointed toward open waters. Families sitting outside on clear nights would pass along folk names for the constellations overhead, many of them stories of legendary emperors, dragons, maidens, and monsters. On autumn evenings, when the moon rose full and bright, they would tell of Chang'e, the moon maiden who flew to the heavens and lives on the moon forever, with only a little jade rabbit as her companion. Some said if you looked carefully at the full moon's face, you could discern her silhouette under a cinnamon tree. Such tales added a human touch to the vast sky, making the cosmos feel a bit more intimate and familiar. During eclipses, the common folk participated in the cosmic drama in their own way. In Chinese mythology, a solar eclipse was caused by a celestial dragon or raven trying to swallow the sun. So when the sun dimmed unaccountably, people would ring bells, beat drums, and shout, hoping to frighten the creature away. Picture a village as a solar eclipse begins. The midday light falters, an uncanny gloom falls, and dogs begin to howl. Villagers emerge with gongs and pots, clanging and yelling at the sky. As the sun's crescent narrows, the commotion grows frantic. Then, as the dragon relinquishes its prize and sunlight returns, a triumphant cheer echoes across the fields, balance restored. Similarly, For a lunar eclipse, they feared a heavenly dog was eating the moon, and the same noisy tactics were employed to rescue it. These practices, half ritual and half earnest, bound communities together in awe and cooperation whenever the heavens put on an unexpected show. As the centuries rolled on, Chinese astronomers continued to refine their craft and record the skies. They noted the appearance of a guest star in the year 1054, long afterward identified as a supernova whose remnants form the Crab Nebula, and tracked the Great Comet of 1066, later known in the West as Halley's Comet. They compiled detailed star atlases, painting dots for stars and labeling them with names, long before similar charts existed elsewhere. Through all these endeavors, one theme remained constant: the quest for harmony between heaven and earth. Each observation, each celestial map, was both an act of science and an act of devotion, aligning human activities to the great pulse of the cosmos. Up above, the great river of the Milky Way mirrors itself in the dark waters of lakes and rivers below. The starry dragon slips toward the western horizon as the white tiger of autumn begins to rise in the east. A cosmic relay from night to night. Our journey through these starry traditions has carried us across the world, from Mesopotamia's ziggurats to Egypt's temples to China's observatories, and shown that these distant cultures, for all their differences, shared a profound bond under the sky. Each looked up and found guidance and mystery in the same stars. As our exploration of these ancient skies comes to a resting point, we leave these astronomers and dreamers to their midnight vigils. The tapestry of their tales and discoveries becomes part of our own story. In the quiet that precedes the dawn, the stars fade over the horizon, but their legacy endures, lighting the way for those who come after. Our journey through cosmic origins will continue. For now we carry with us the whispers of these ancient stars, the comfort of their eternal presence, and the timeless human longing to understand our place beneath the heavens. By the dawn of the classical age, humanity's relationship with the night sky had grown deeper and more sophisticated. The stars were no longer just distant lights. They had become storytellers and timekeepers. Ancient peoples gazed upward and saw their gods, heroes, and destinies shimmering above. As we journey now through the classical world, from Greece and Rome to India and Mesoamerica, we enter a realm where mythic symbolism meets celestial calculation. The tone is hushed and wandering, as if we are gathered under a canopy of stars, listening to the whispered tales of the cosmos. Imagine a warm evening in ancient Greece. The air is gentle and still. Overhead, countless stars pierce the darkness, and the Milky Way arcs across the sky like a faint silver river. On a hillside outside a small village, a group of Greeks sits around a crackling fire. An elderly storyteller, his face lit by the golden glow, raises an arm toward the constellations. With a calm, rhythmic voice, he begins to recount the legends written in these stars. He points out a band of stars twinkling near the horizon. Andromeda, faint but visible. The storyteller speaks of the princess Andromeda, once doomed to be sacrificed to a sea serpent because of her mother's pride. He tells how Perseus, the hero, slew the Gorgon, and then, on his journey home, found Andromeda chained to a coastal rock, waves crashing at her feet under a stormy sky. Perseus fell in love with the princess at first sight. In the ensuing battle by moonlight, he vanquished the serpent and freed her. In time, as the tale goes, the gods placed Andromeda among the stars, along with her parents, Cepheus and Cassiopeia, and her saviour Perseus himself. The storyteller motions to each constellation in turn. Cassiopeia's five-starred throne gleaming high overhead. Perseus holding the Gorgon's head. Andromeda stretched out in eternal repose. To the listening villagers, the night sky is alive with this drama, a celestial theatre where mortals and immortals play out eternal stories. The crackle of the fire mimics the distant glitter of starlight as the story sinks in, and one can almost picture Andromeda's shimmering figure gently flickering with each twinkle above. Now the storyteller arcs his hand toward the west, where a tight cluster of 7 faint stars is about to set. In Greek, they call these the Pleiades, the 7 sisters. His voice lowers conspiratorially as he shares their story. Long ago, these sisters were the daughters of Atlas and Pleione, 7 lovely nymphs who attracted the attention of the great hunter Orion. Orion fell hopelessly in love with their beauty and pursued them relentlessly across the earth. For 7 years he chased them, and the sisters, in desperation, prayed to Zeus for escape. Zeus took pity and transformed the sisters into doves, then into stars, lifting them into the sky out of Orion's reach. But even the heavens did not end their chase. Zeus also set the image of Orion in the sky, towering and brilliant. And so to this day, Orion continues his pursuit each night. The storyteller traces Orion's form, the 3 bright stars of his belt, the glinting star of his shoulder, ruddy Betelgeuse, the shining Rigel at his foot. There is Orion, rising higher as the night deepens, and there are the Pleiades, sinking low, eternally just beyond his grasp. The listeners smile at the poignant image, a love story played out in slow motion every clear night, year after year. Above the gentle Greek hills, one can almost sense Orion's determination and the sisters' graceful escape. All across Greece, similar tales are told under starlight. The constellations became a proud tapestry of Hellenic myth. High in the north, the Great Bear, Ursa Major, circles the pole star. The Greeks say she was once the nymph Callisto, transformed into a bear and placed in the sky by Zeus. In her nightly wheel around the pole, Callisto is forever searching for her lost son, who himself shines nearby as the little bear. These stories intertwine. Callisto's son, Arcas, nearly slew his enchanted mother during a hunt, not recognizing her bear form, until Zeus intervened to save them both by casting them into the heavens. And so, the Greeks explain, the Great Bear and Little Bear remain safely in the sky, turning around the fixed North Star and never dipping below the horizon. The people of Greece watch them endlessly circling, secure in the knowledge that these familiar stars will always be there, guardians of the northern sky. Even the seasons and daily rhythms came alive through myth. When the constellation of the mighty hunter Orion sets in the west at dawn and disappears for a season, the Greeks see it as Orion diving into the underworld, or perhaps resting from the hunt. When Orion rises again in the autumn evening, his return signals the start of the hunting season. The starry patterns were thus a cosmic clock, each constellation's arrival and departure marking time in the agricultural and spiritual life of the people. The first appearance of the bright star Sirius before sunrise, its heliacal rising in late summer, meant the hottest days were approaching. They called these the dog days, named after Sirius, the dog star, faithful companion to Orion in the sky. In Greek myth, Sirius was the loyal hunting dog, Laelaps, or sometimes associated with Cerberus, the guardian of Hades. But here in the sky, he accompanies Orion eternally. When Sirius rose, the Nile would begin to swell, as the Egyptians had long noted, and the Greeks too took heed of its appearance as an omen of heat and perhaps of pestilence. Each celestial event carried meaning. Yet as steeped in mythology as Greek stargazing was, it also nurtured the first sprouts of scientific astronomy. We find ourselves transported to another scene, an early Greek observatory, perhaps on the island of Rhodes, or in the Library of Alexandria, centuries later. The tone shifts slightly, still reverent and awed by the stars, but now with a curiosity about their patterns. Picture a Greek philosopher, robed in white, standing under the same brilliant sky. Instead of telling myths, he is measuring and cataloguing. In one hand, he holds a curious instrument, a bronze astrolabe, or perhaps a sighting rod, using it to gauge the angle of a star above the horizon. He marks the star's position against engraved scales, noting the date and time. Scrolls and tables surround him, illuminated by a gentle oil lamp. This scholar is part of a lineage that thirsted to understand the cosmos in logical terms. The Greeks inherited astronomical knowledge from older civilizations like Babylon and Egypt, but they made it their own. In a tranquil voice, as if reading an ancient chronicle, we recount how Thales, one of the legendary 7 sages of Greece, is said to have predicted a solar eclipse. On a fateful day in 585 BC, day turned to twilight over a battle between the Medes and the Lydians. Soldiers dropped their weapons in fear as the sky darkened. Whether by calculation or by learning from Babylonian star charts, Thales had foreseen this event. It was one of the first times in Western history that the movements of the heavens were understood as predictable, a whisper that the cosmos might operate by discoverable laws, not just whims of the gods. Later, Pythagoras taught that the universe was built on number and harmony. He and his followers looked up and imagined the spheres on which the sun, moon, and planets moved, producing a celestial music, the music of the spheres, too perfect and constant for human ears to hear. It was a mystical yet rationalizing vision, the idea that mathematical harmony underlies the chaos of the heavens. Under the silent dome of the Greek night, one could almost sense this hidden music as the stars slid westward. Now the narration guides us to Aristotle, standing in a colonnaded lyceum under a clear Athens sky, explaining his model of the cosmos to students gathered around. In Aristotle's calm reasoning, the earth is a sphere at the center of it all, and the sun, moon, planets, and stars are embedded in concentric crystalline shells that rotate around us. The outermost shell bears the fixed stars, the constellations we know, and it rotates daily, carrying the stars with it. The students glance up at the wheeling heavens above Athens, imagining those transparent spheres turning overhead, perfectly ordered, driven by the prime mover. It's a deeply reassuring picture. The cosmos as a grand, well-ordered machine, consistent and knowable. Yet even in its logic, it still carries a sense of wonder. For Aristotle's spheres, though rational, are divine, made of an ethereal, unchanging substance he called ether. They are perfection incarnate, unlike the flawed and changeable world below the moon. The narrator's voice notes how in Aristotle's cosmos, myth and reason intertwined. The stars are no longer gods, but they reside in a realm of the divine, immune to decay, eternal lights in the firmament. We drift next to the 3rd century BC, where on a summer night in Alexandria, the intellectual beacon of the Mediterranean, a poet named Aratus pens a didactic poem called Phenomena. In a soothing meter, he describes the constellations and the weather signs, preserving both practical star knowledge and the rich mythology associated with each constellation. The narrator recites a gentle line or two, paraphrased, not as a formal quote, but as if retelling. From his golden seat, Zeus himself gave these stars as signs for sailors and farmers alike. The Great Bear never sinks beneath the ocean waves, guiding the lost with her steadfast light. Through Aratus's verses, hugely popular in the Hellenistic world, even those who couldn't read scholarly texts learned how to identify the rising of Arcturus, to know when the autumn storms approached, or how Orion's setting signaled the onset of winter. His poem became a kind of celestial handbook, blending utility with the enchantment of myth. We hear it in a soft, rhythmic lilt, invoking images of gentle breezes and twinkling stars, as each constellation in turn is named and characterized for the listener. As the Greek chapter of our journey unfolds, we realize that the ancients did something profound. They bridged the gap between mythic imagination and systematic observation. Perhaps the pinnacle of this union was achieved by Hipparchus of Nicaea, a Greek astronomer of the 2nd century BC. The scene is the island of Rhodes, around 150 BC. Hipparchus stands in a courtyard under an ink-black sky salted with stars. A faint breeze ruffles his robes. He is intently comparing what he sees now to observations made years and generations before. In one hand, a papyrus scroll of star positions catalogued by earlier skywatchers. In the other, his own measurements taken with painstaking care. According to later accounts, Hipparchus witnessed a new star, perhaps a supernova or nova, that flared into visibility where no star had been seen before. This startling event moved him to create something unprecedented. A comprehensive star catalogue, listing about 1,000 fixed stars along with their precise locations in the sky. By mapping the heavens so meticulously, Hipparchus could leave a reference for future observers to detect changes. And indeed, through this work, he discovered a great celestial secret. The narrator explains in a hushed, wondrous tone. Hipparchus found that the positions of the stars were not absolutely fixed. The entire star field was drifting ever so slightly. Comparing his records to those of astronomers a century or two earlier, he noticed that certain stars were a little further west than expected relative to the equinox. The shift was tiny, almost imperceptible, but real, an effect we now know as the precession of the equinoxes, caused by the slow wobble of Earth's axis. To the Greeks, it was as if the very vault of heaven, the immutable firmament of the gods, had a grand motion of its own over centuries. Hipparchus's heart must have pounded at this revelation. The narrator invites us to imagine him, under the silent stars, realizing that even over human generations, the cosmic order itself changes subtly, like a great wheel turning behind the scenes of the familiar constellations. It added a layer of mystery. There were patterns behind patterns, rhythms beyond the old myths. Greek astronomy reached its climax with Claudius Ptolemy in the 2nd century AD, working in Roman Egypt. In his scholarly refuge in Alexandria, Ptolemy compiled the Almagest, a monumental treatise that would be the world's astronomy Bible for over 1,000 years. Imagine him, a precise and patient man, drawing together centuries of observations, many from Hipparchus, and refining a model of the cosmos with Earth at the center and planets moving on epicycles. The narrator's voice smiles gently as it notes that Ptolemy catalogued 48 constellations, virtually all those known to the Greeks, and which form the basis of the 88 we recognize today. These included the heroes, monsters, and animals of Greek myth. Mighty Heracles kneeling in the sky, the winged horse Pegasus, the snake handler Ophiuchus, and so on. Although Ptolemy's work was highly mathematical, He preserved the ancient constellation lore as a convenient map of the heavens. Thanks to him, the Greek myths truly became the universal star map, surviving even beyond the pagan world. One can picture Ptolemy, quill in hand by lamplight, carefully recording the brightness of each star in Orion or Scorpius, perhaps sometimes recalling the old stories behind their names as he works through the long nights. In that diligent labour, the mythic figures were immortalized in science. The Greek relationship with the stars was not only scholarly, it was also spiritual and personal. Many Greeks felt a deep human connection with the night sky. The philosopher Plato once suggested that the celestial motions were the visible part of the soul's music, that by observing the heavens, one might attune the soul to cosmic harmony. In a gentle, musing tone, the narration ponders how on quiet nights in Athens or on the Aegean Islands, a lone thinker might watch the heavens and feel that sense of harmony and kinship with the stars, the mind drifting among them. As we prepare to leave Greece, the narrator describes one last Greek scene to gently transition us. Dawn is approaching over the Aegean Sea. The stars fade one by one into the brightening blue. Venus gleams brilliant in the east, the morning star, which the Greeks have called Phosphorus, the bringer of light. In a poetic whisper, the narrator notes how this same celestial object will be Hesperus, the evening star, when it appears after sunset. Greek poets marveled that the two were one and the same planet, a discovery attributed to Pythagoreans. The morning star, a herald of sunrise, and the evening star, a tender light at dusk. Both turned out to be Venus, cycling through her phases. Thus, even the gods' identities could merge. Phosphorus and Hesperus were one. The Greeks understood and accepted this, weaving it into their worldview. Knowledge expanding, but wonder never diminished. As Greek civilization's day makes way for Rome's ascent, the sky remains the same canvas, ready for new interpretations. Now, as gentle as a breeze crossing the sea, our narrative shifts westward and forward in time to ancient Rome. The Romans inherited the Greek constellations and many of their myths, giving them Latin names. Zeus became Jupiter, Hera became Juno, and so the starry characters of Greece found new life in Roman culture. But Rome would contribute its own chapters to the lore of the heavens, chapters filled with omens and order, power and portent. We begin the Roman story on a balmy summer night in July of 44 BC, in the heart of Rome itself. The city is abuzz with an unprecedented celestial sight. Picture thousands of Romans gathered in the Forum or packed into the grand Colosseum-like arenas. The Colosseum itself was built later, but think of large public spaces. The occasion is the Ludi Victoriae Caesaris, games held to honour the recently assassinated Julius Caesar. The air is thick with incense and the shouts of spectators watching chariot races by day. But as twilight falls and a deep purple sky emerges, the crowds look upward. Gasps ripple through the city. There, in the northwest sky, a bright star with a blazing tail has appeared, a comet, shining clearly even in the dusk. For 7 days it will be visible, even in daylight at times. The Roman people stand in awe. Murmurs spread that this is no ordinary star. The narrator, in an awed yet measured tone, tells us, "This is the famous Caesar's comet." To the Romans, this brilliant comet is not a mere ball of ice and dust near the sun. It is a potent omen. In those fervent post-assassination months, when Julius Caesar had been stabbed in the Senate and Rome teetered between chaos and the birth of an empire, the public seizes upon the comet as a sign from the gods. They believe it is the soul of Caesar himself, taking its place in the heavens. After all, Julius Caesar, the great conqueror, was being posthumously deified by decree of the Senate, declared officially a god, Divus Julius. What more fitting proof of his divinity than a new star ascending to join the celestial pantheon? Roman writers later record how the common folk cheered and celebrated the comet, calling it the Julian star. We can imagine the young Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, not yet known as Augustus, standing among the people, or perhaps at a private vantage, looking at the comet with a mix of grief and political cunning. He would later claim this celestial event as auspicious. His father Julius has become a god, so Octavian himself is Divi Filius, the son of a god, giving him a divine mandate. The narrator's voice might portray how Octavian had coins minted with the comet's image, 8 rays flaring out, and the words, Divine Julius. In Rome, the cosmos and politics were deeply entwined. A streak of light in the heavens could change the course of history by inspiring belief and consolidating power. And under that shimmering omen, the Roman Republic quietly dies, and the Roman Empire is born, with Octavian eventually taking the title Augustus and reshaping the world, all under the watch of a new star. The Romans, ever practical and devout, were avid sky watchers, but for them, the heavens were a system of signs to be interpreted. In a soothing, explanatory tone, we recount how omens were an integral part of Roman life. They believed the gods communicated through natural phenomena. A flash of lightning, a sudden storm, a flight of birds, all could convey a divine message. And above all, celestial omens were most dramatic. A solar eclipse turning day to eerie twilight could send armies scrambling and prompt priests to perform emergency sacrifices. A lunar eclipse, with the moon's face turning blood red, was seen as a bad omen for life on Earth, perhaps portending the death of a leader or some disaster. Romans often reacted to eclipses with rituals. During a lunar eclipse, they would clash brass instruments or shout and make noise, hoping to scare away whatever monster or dragon was thought to be devouring the moon. These practices, similar to those in other ancient cultures, show how visceral and immediate the connection between sky and society was. The narrator might guide us through one such event imaginatively. It is midday on a Roman summer in 218 BC, and suddenly the sky darkens. People in the markets of Rome gaze up in frightened confusion. The sun has vanished behind the moon, a total eclipse. Birds roost early, a strange chill falls. The Romans at that time, lacking the Greeks' scientific understanding, feel panic. Livy, the historian, would later write of many prodigies reported in those tumultuous years when Hannibal threatened Rome, eclipses, comets, lightning strikes on temples, all interpreted as omens of war and upheaval. But as quickly as it came, the sunlight returns, like the gods relighting a celestial lamp. The people exhale in relief. In our narration, the fear gives way again to the warm familiarity of daylight, as we remind the listener how deeply Romans felt these events in their bones. While the heavens could scare, they could also guide. The Romans looked to the stars for a sense of cosmic order. Perhaps nothing exemplifies this more than their calendar, the very structure by which they ordered their lives. The early Roman calendar was a haphazard thing, rooted in the cycles of the moon and frequently adjusted by political whim. By the 1st century BC, it had drifted badly out of alignment with the seasons. Festivals that were meant to be in spring were falling in summer. The harvest celebration was no longer in harvest time. This was more than an inconvenience. To the Romans, it signified that the harmony between heaven's cycle and earthly time had broken down. It needed a strong hand to fix it. That hand was Julius Caesar's. Now imagine Julius Caesar in Alexandria, Egypt, in the year 46 BC. The city of Alexandria is a place of learning, home to scholars and astronomers who are heirs to both Greek and Egyptian knowledge. Caesar, amid his famous liaison with Cleopatra, is also fascinated by the wisdom of her court. Egyptian astronomers had long used a 365-day calendar tied to the sun and stars. The heliacal rising of Sirius had anchored their year. Under a starry Egyptian sky on the banks of the Nile, Caesar consults with an astronomer, perhaps one named Sosigenes of Alexandria, about how to reform Rome's calendar. The narrator's tone is curious and enlightened as we describe how Sosigenes explains the solar year to Caesar. Approximately 365 and 1/4 days long, the Egyptians knew this and would add extra days to keep the calendar aligned. If Rome adopted a solar calendar, no longer would the months slide through the seasons. Time itself would be regularized, stable, imperial. Returning to Rome, Julius Caesar, as Pontifex Maximus, high priest of the Roman state religion, had the authority to change the calendar. He decreed that the year we now call 46 BC would be extended to an absurd length. Historians dubbed it the last year of confusion. It lasted 445 days to realign the spring equinox to late March, where it belonged. Then, in 45 BC, the new Julian calendar took effect. In our gentle narrative, we can almost feel the relief of Roman citizens as order is restored. Farmers once again see spring festivals in spring. The months now have fixed lengths. A leap day is added every 4 years, what we call February 29th, to account for the quarter day. The narrator highlights in a proud, calm tone that this calendar was so successful it governed Western timekeeping for nearly 1600 years, with only minor adjustments, and our modern calendar is still essentially Julius Caesar's gift. We might share a small humanizing detail. Julius Caesar renamed the month of Quintilis after himself. Thus July, Julius's month, was born. Later, his successor Augustus did the same with August, formerly Sextilis. In doing so, they inscribed their legacy into the very fabric of time. The narrator notes softly how fascinating it is that even today, when we check a calendar or plan our year, we speak the names July and August, echoing the vanity and vision of those Roman rulers. It is a testament to how the imperatives of empire and the movements of the heavens were woven together. Beyond calendars and comets, the Romans also found meaning in the planets and zodiac. Much like the Greeks, astrology had been introduced to the Roman world from the Hellenistic East. The Greeks themselves had learned much from Mesopotamian astrology. By the late Republic and early Empire, it was fashionable, though sometimes frowned upon by authorities, to have one's horoscope cast. Picture a wealthy Roman matron reclined on a couch in a villa, consulting an astrologer about the fate of her children or the prospects of a sea voyage. The astrologer, robed and mysterious, uses an armillary sphere or marked charts to determine the positions of the planets at the precise time of the child's birth. In a soft voice, he explains that Mars was ascendant, indicating courage and perhaps a fiery temper. Jupiter was favourably placed, promising wealth or honours, but Saturn loomed at a bad angle, cautioning of challenges in old age. The matron listens intently, the lamplight flickering on mosaic-decorated walls. In our narration, we don't need to judge the validity of these claims. We simply note the scene to illustrate how intimately the Romans tried to link their personal lives to the patterns of the cosmos. It provided comfort, a sense of destiny woven by the stars themselves. Even emperors were not immune. Augustus, the first emperor, reportedly consulted astrologers and took pride that his birth sign Capricorn was propitious. Coins of Augustus sometimes bore the image of Capricorn as a symbol of his golden age. However, astrology could be a double-edged sword in Rome. The narrator might recount gently how at times emperors like Tiberius, or later emperors, would ban astrologers from Rome or issue edicts against consulting them, especially when they feared plots. Too many powerful men had been warned by the stars that perhaps they should be emperor instead, a dangerous spark for rebellion. But such bans rarely lasted. Astrology had sunk too deep into the fabric of society to be excised. It was yet another way the Romans sought order and insight from the heavens. Roman views of cosmic order also seeped into their architecture and monuments. An especially poetic example comes from Emperor Augustus's reign. In 13 BC, Augustus dedicated the Ara Pacis, the altar of peace, in Rome, celebrating the peace and prosperity his rule had brought after years of civil war. But Augustus also commissioned a grand monument called the Solarium Augusti, a giant sundial, or solar calendar, in the Campus Martius, using an Egyptian obelisk he'd brought to Rome as the gnomon, the shadow-casting pointer. This obelisk, standing tall under the Roman sun, cast a long shadow that moved with the hours and seasons. According to some reconstructions, on Augustus's birthday in late September, the tip of the obelisk's shadow would fall precisely on the center of the Ara Pacis altar. Whether perfectly accurate or not, the symbolism is powerful. The heavens themselves were marking the special day of Rome's leader and the fruits of peace. In the narration, we paint the scene. A bright Roman afternoon, the obelisk's shadow inching across a marble plaza, where delicate lines and bronze inscriptions mark the months and zodiac signs. A small group of Romans stands observing as the shadow aligns with a notable mark, and they murmur that it's the princeps' birthday, and the gods are showing approval. This merging of cosmic cycles with imperial propaganda exemplifies cosmic order. Augustus was effectively saying that his reign was in harmony with the heavens, that the sun and stars were on his side. Under Roman rule, the Mediterranean world felt a sense of unity, partly reinforced by shared celestial reference points. A sailor in a Roman port in Syria could discuss the stars with a trader from Spain and find common ground, because Rome had adopted and spread the constellation framework of the Greeks. We hear the gentle slosh of waves and creaking of ropes as a Roman merchant ship departs Ostia at twilight. The pilot of the ship gazes up to find Polaris, the North Star, no longer called by a Greek name, but simply Stella Maris, Star of the Sea, or Cynosura to those who recall Greek. He sets his course knowing that star points north, guiding countless navigators across calm and storm. The narrator remarks that by this era, understanding the sky was no mere pastime. It was essential for travel, for commerce, for the very connectivity of the vast empire. We might conclude our Roman sky lore with a short reflection in the narrator's soothing voice. Standing on a balcony on Palatine Hill, one clear midnight, perhaps the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor of the 2nd century, looks out over the twinkling lights of Rome and then up at the eternal stars above. In his private thoughts, we know from his writings, Meditations, he often considered how small human life was in the grand scheme of the cosmos. He mused that one should live in harmony with nature's laws, that the stars and the turning seasons were all part of a providential plan. The narrator can paraphrase an idea from Marcus. Dwell on the beauty of life, watch the stars, and see yourself running with them. In that tranquil, introspective moment, we see the culmination of the classical Greco-Roman star law. The sky as a mirror for our souls, a source of guidance and humility, an endless expanse that nonetheless feels like home. The classical Mediterranean has given us so much: constellations and calendars, myths and measurements. Now, our cosmic journey softly shifts direction and travels eastward, to a land of monsoons and mystics, to ancient India, where a wholly different, yet strangely resonant star law was flourishing. Imagine a clear tropical night in the Indian subcontinent, perhaps around 500 BC. We find ourselves near a quiet ashram, a spiritual hermitage, deep in a forest. The air is rich with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the distant chorus of cicadas. Above, the sky is as dark velvet embroidered with countless stars. Around a sacred fire sit a group of rishis, sages, and their disciples. One sage, with matted hair and serene eyes, raises his hand toward the north. In a voice barely above a whisper, with a cadence that suggests both reverence and authority, he describes Dhruva, the pole star. In Indian legend, Dhruva was once a young prince. As a boy, Dhruva showed unwavering devotion through severe penance, impressing Lord Vishnu, one of the supreme deities. Vishnu granted him a boon. Dhruva would become immortal, fixed in the heavens as the guiding star that never moves. As the sage tells this story, the disciples gaze at the pole star, indeed seemingly fixed in place, and they feel the power of Dhruva's steadfastness emanating from that tiny point of light. Surrounding Dhruva, the sage points out a constellation of 7 bright stars, making a curved shape. This is Saptarishi, what Westerners call the Big Dipper. To Indians, these are 7 great sages of antiquity, the Saptarishis, circling reverently around Dhruva's throne in the sky. One student imagines those sage stars as radiant beings, perhaps carrying lamps of wisdom, eternally going around the hub of heaven, never straying, a cosmic dance of guru and devotee. Under the same sky, another Indian storyteller, perhaps a grandmother in a village, points out the hazy arc of the Milky Way to an attentive child. In India, they call it the Akash Ganga, the heavenly Ganges River. It's as though the sacred river Ganges that flows across the plains of India has a counterpart in the sky, flowing with stars instead of water. The grandmother recounts how the Ganges, was a divine river that once only flowed in the heavens, but was brought down to earth by the prayers of an ancient king so that its waters could purify and bless humanity. As she speaks, the child envisions the broad shimmer of the Milky Way as a celestial river of light coursing through the night, and feels a continuity between heaven and earth, one reflecting the other. Indian culture is rich with such connections between the heavens and earthly life. The narrator's voice highlights how, for Indians, the sky was woven into daily existence and spirituality. Each dawn, the rising sun was greeted with mantras and offerings. Surya, the sun god, was depicted as a resplendent deity riding a chariot drawn by 7 horses, sometimes said to represent the 7 colors of light or the 7 days of the week. In the cool pre-dawn, a devout person might stand at a riverbank, palms pressed together, and lift water to the heavens, in offering as the first rays of sunlight spill over the horizon, chanting a Gayatri prayer. The narration softly describes the golden disk of the sun ascending, mirrored in the river's ripples, and for a moment, sky and earth join in that ritual. With night's arrival, it was Chandra, the moon god, who held sway. One could imagine an ancient Indian poet gazing at the full moon and calling it Chandran's gentle face, illuminated with soothing, cool rays. The moon for them was a deity riding a celestial chariot across the sky, just as Surya did by day. Around him, countless stars formed his entourage. However, the moon had special stories. In one popular legend taught to children and recorded in Puranic lore, the moon, called Chandra or Soma, was married to 27 sisters. These sisters were none other than the nakshatras, the personified star maidens corresponding to the 27 lunar mansions or asterisms along the moon's path. The narrator explains kindly that the ancient Indians divided the sky into 27 sectors, each marked by a prominent star or cluster, to track the moon's progress throughout the month. The names of these nakshatras are poetic: Ashvini, the horsewoman; Rohini, the red lady; Pushya, the nurturer; Swati, the independent one, and so on. They are both astronomical markers and divine figures. Now the legend unfolds. Chandra, the moon, spends one night with each star wife in turn as he orbits Earth. But Chandra loved one wife above all, Rohini. Rohini's star is known today as Aldebaran, a bright red star in the constellation of Taurus. She was beautiful and radiant, and Chandra found himself tarrying longer in her company, neglecting his visits to the other wives. The sisters grew jealous and complained to their father, the great sage Daksha. Daksha, in a stern fury at the moon god's partiality, cursed Chandra. "May you fade away." Thus the story explains that Chandra began to wane, losing a bit of his lustrous form each night. The world grew darker as the moon god languished under the curse, dwindling to a thin crescent and then disappearing entirely, the new moon. This caused concern, and the wives relented, not wanting their husband to vanish completely. They pleaded with Daksha to forgive Chandra. Daksha could not fully revoke the curse, but he softened it. After vanishing, Chandra would regain his strength. So the moon does not die forever. He is reborn and waxes night after night back to fullness. The narrator tells this story in a soothing, bedtime story tone, making it easy to visualize the caring star wives, the stern father, and the ailing moon. And as the resolution comes, the moon recovers and the cycle repeats. It gives a mythic explanation for the waxing and waning of the moon that aligns so neatly with what any child can observe. It also embeds an astronomical practice, tracking the moon's position against stars, within a charming moral tale about fairness and cycles of forgiveness. Eclipses, too, received a vivid mythological treatment. When the full moon suddenly darkened and turned reddish, or the sun was blotted out during daytime, Indians had a dramatic narrative to explain it: the tale of Rahu and Ketu. The narrator's voice deepens a touch, adding a hint of drama. According to myth, during a great churning of the cosmic ocean, the Samudra Manthan, the gods and demons worked together to produce Amrita, the nectar of immortality. As the nectar was being distributed, a clever demon named Rahu disguised himself and sat among the gods to sip some for himself. The sun and moon deities noticed this intruder and alerted Vishnu, who swiftly decapitated Rahu. But Rahu had already sipped the divine nectar, so though his body died, his head lived on, now immortal and filled with fury. The head of Rahu became a bodiless dragon in the sky. In perpetual revenge, Rahu's head chased the sun and the moon, seeking to swallow them for tattling on him. When Rahu manages to engulf the sun or moon, an eclipse occurs. But since he has no body, the luminary soon emerges from his severed neck, escaping once more. Ketu, in some versions, is the name given to Rahu's decapitated tail, which also lives on as a separate celestial force. The narrator describes this cosmic drama in an almost storybook fashion. One can picture a disembodied fierce head flying through the heavens, mouth open, attempting to chomp down on the glowing orbs. The ancients would hear that and look up at a lunar eclipse, the moon gradually consumed by darkness, and feel they understood the divine play behind it. However, alongside myth, Indian scholars impressively figured out the true scientific pattern of eclipses as well. They identified Rahu and Ketu in astronomical terms as the lunar nodes, the invisible points where the moon's orbit intersects the ecliptic, the sun's path. The narrator might note in an appreciatively informative tone, Indian astronomers were calculating eclipse timings by at least the later 1st millennium BC. They created algorithms to predict when the sun, moon, and Rahu, Ketu would align. So, fascinatingly, even as the common folk clanged pots and pans or immersed themselves in the drama of the demon swallowing the moon, the learned court astronomers, Jyotishis, quietly understood that it was an alignment of celestial bodies casting shadows. The two explanations coexisted, one to satisfy the heart and imagination, and one for the intellect. It's a beautiful example of mythic symbolism meeting celestial calculation, just as our theme suggests. Indeed, ancient India produced some of the earliest known texts on astronomy. In a gentle, explanatory style, the narrator describes the Vedanga Jyotisha, an astronomy manual attached to the Vedas, the oldest sacred texts of India. Compiled perhaps around 1200–800 BC, with roots possibly even older, it outlines rules for tracking the sun and moon to maintain the calendar for rituals. One can imagine an early astronomer priest consulting this text late at night by the light of an oil lamp, cross-referencing the positions of constellations with the timing of seasonal ceremonies. The text taught them how to align the lunar months with the solar year by occasionally inserting an extra month, adhik mas, thereby keeping the sacred fires lit at the proper times of year. In the stillness of the night, these priest astronomers would have observed the star Sirius, known as Mrigavyada, the deer hunter, or Lubdaka, appearing just before dawn in late summer, heralding the coming rains. They tracked the progress of Jupiter and Saturn, bright points wandering among the fixed stars, and noted which nakshatra, star mansion, they were in. With this knowledge, they compiled panchangs, almanacs that marked auspicious dates, eclipses, full moons, and more. The narrator describes a scene of a town crier, or pandit, proclaiming the New Year's calendar in a village square, listing when the monsoons are expected, when eclipses will occur. There will be a lunar eclipse in the month of Ashada. Do not fear, it is just Rahu doing his mischief. When to sow seeds, when certain festivals like Diwali or the spring holly will fall. This practical application of astronomy bound the society's rhythm to the cosmic rhythm. As time flows on in our narrative, we mention great Indian astronomers and mathematicians who further melded the mythic and the scientific. Aryabhata, around 500 AD, is a towering figure. The narrator, proud and calm, explains how Aryabhata, in his youth, would have observed the skies from the banks of the Ganges, pondering the motions. In his magnum opus, the Aryabhatiya, he proposed astonishing ideas, that the earth rotates on its axis, explaining the daily rising and setting of stars and sun as an illusion caused by our own spinning, which was very close to the truth. He described the orbits of planets around the sun in terms of epicycles according to the geocentric view of his time. But his mathematical approach allowed fairly accurate predictions. He computed the length of the solar year to a high degree of accuracy: 365 days, 6 hours, 12 minutes, and 30 seconds, only a few minutes off the modern value. He explained that the moon and planets shine by reflected sunlight, a conceptual leap that shows a scientific understanding beyond the myth of sun and moon as independent lights. And when it came to eclipses, Aryabhata explicitly wrote that lunar eclipses occur when the moon enters Earth's shadow, and solar eclipses when the moon covers the sun, effectively stating the modern explanation and demystifying Rahu's role, though the term Rahu was still used as a convenient way to refer to the eclipse node. The narration conveys a sense of admiration. This was truly celestial calculation reaching new heights, in an era when much of the world still clung solely to supernatural explanations. Yet, interestingly, none of this completely erased the rich tapestry of stories. Both lived hand in hand. One moment, an astronomer could be calculating the next eclipse with pen and palm leaf manuscript, and the next he could join his family in banging drums during that eclipse to frighten the demon away. Sometimes rational knowledge doesn't cancel deep cultural practice, especially when the practice is comforting or communal. The Indian sky was crowded with not just stars, but planets called grahas. Traditional lore counted 9 primary celestial influences: the Navagraha, the Sun, Surya, Moon, Chandra, those 2 considered planets in the astrological sense. 5 visible true planets: Mercury, Buddha, Venus, Shukra, Mars, Mangala, Jupiter, Brihaspati, Saturn, Shani, and the 2 shadow planets, Rahu and Ketu, the lunar nodes. Temples often had shrines to these Navagraha, acknowledging their impact on human affairs. The narrator might paint a serene image of a temple courtyard where statues or symbols of the 9 grahas are arrayed, garlanded with marigolds, while a priest chants for balance and mitigation of any ill effects. People believed these celestial forces could affect one's health, fortune, and even personality. It's a different flavor of connecting to the cosmos. Whereas the Greeks and Romans had personified gods who ruled the planets, Indian thought saw the planets themselves as deities, or at least carriers of divine will that could dispense karma. Our journey through India's star lore also highlights cosmic imagination on the grandest scale. In Indian philosophy and myth, time was cyclic and enormous. The narrator, voice full of quiet awe, describes the concept of yugas and kalpas. In one scheme, there are 4 yugas, ages: Satya Yuga, the age of truth; Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga, the current age of darkness and discord. Together, these 4 yugas span 4.32 million years, which is 1 Mahayuga. 1,000 Mahayugas make a kalpa, which is a day of Brahma, the creator. About 4.32 billion years, interestingly close to the age of Earth, as we now estimate. After 1 day of Brahma, he sleeps, and there's a night of equal length when dissolution occurs. Then Brahma awakens, and creation begins anew. One cannot help but notice how this resonates with modern scientific timescales. Yet it was conceived thousands of years ago in mythic form. Perhaps these enormous figures were not literal to the ancients, but they convey the sense of an infinite, breathing cosmos, cycles of expansion and contraction, of creation and destruction. The narrator can liken it to the stars above. Stars are born, they shine for ages. They die in dramatic explosions or fade, and new stars emerge. A cosmic cycle. The Indian Yuga stories metaphorically captured that eternally renewing cosmos. In a soothing manner, the narrator notes that in the current Kali Yuga, which by traditional reckoning began at the moment of Krishna's death, about 3102 BC, and will last 432,000 years, humanity is considered to be at a spiritual low ebb. Yet these vast cycles assure that eventually a new golden age will come. It's as if the cosmos itself had moral epochs. We visualize perhaps an Indian astronomer from medieval times, looking not just at the practical motions, but also reflecting philosophically, perhaps at the University of Nalanda, or in the court of Emperor Akbar centuries later, murmuring verses from the Upanishads, which say, "As above, so below," or contemplate that the Atman, soul, of a person is one with Brahman, the universe. The stars are not just out there, they are also, in a way, in here. That is a very Indian sentiment, that the microcosm, us, reflects the macrocosm, the universe. As the Indian segment draws to a close, perhaps the narrator gives us one more gentle night scene. On a riverbank by the sacred Ganges in Varanasi, the night sky glittering overhead, priests perform the Ganga Aarti, a nightly ritual of offering lamps to the river. Thousands of tiny flame offerings mirror in the dark waters, like stars brought to earth. The sound of bells and chanting fills the warm night air. And above, the constellations silently keep their watch. Indians saw no divide between the earthly and the celestial. One was a continuation of the other. The very term for the study of the heavens was Jyotisha, meaning the science of light, celestial bodies. But it was a Vedanga, a limb of the Vedas, meaning it was integral to understanding the sacred. As the priests lift lamps upward in circular motions, one can't help but think they are honoring the stars themselves. With hearts and minds full of these rich Vedic star stories and scientific insights, we now let our gaze drift far across the oceans, to a completely different world under the sky, to the Americas of antiquity. It's time to explore the classical star lore of the Maya and Aztec, the brilliant civilizations of Mesoamerica. Our scene opens in the dense jungles of the Yucatan. It is a humid tropical night, circa 800 AD, near the peak of Maya civilization's classical age. The jungle sounds of crickets and distant howler monkeys provide a rhythmic backdrop to silence. Rising above the canopy are the stepped pyramids of a great Maya city, perhaps Tikal or Chichen Itza. Atop one pyramid, a lone figure stands against the starry sky. He is a Maya astronomer priest, clad in a white cotton robe, a jade ornament glinting at his neck. His eyes are trained on the heavens, which are incredibly clear and bright in this era before any light pollution. The narrator invites us to step into his perspective. All around him, the horizon is dark, except for faint silhouettes of mountains or more temples. Above, the familiar stars look unfamiliar in pattern. The Greeks' constellations are unknown here. Instead, he sees different shapes. Perhaps a celestial parrot, or a scorpion, or the dark patches of the Milky Way, forming the shape of a cosmic canoe, carrying gods. The Milky Way itself, arching overhead, might at times be imagined as the world tree, a giant ceiba tree connecting the underworld, earth, and sky. This Maya priest's observations are not casual. He carries with him records on folded bark paper books, the codices, filled with glyphs and numbers. By the flicker of a torch, we see some of these pages, rows of hieroglyphs and dot and bar numbers, the Maya's unique base 20 system, detailing dates and celestial events. Perhaps he is checking when the planet Venus will next rise as the morning star. Venus was of paramount importance to Mesoamericans. The narrator explains in a soft, instructive tone. The Maya called Venus the Chak Ek, the great star. They mythologized it as a twin of the sun or as a harbinger of war and sacrifice. One of the Maya codices, we know now as the Dresden Codex, contains a detailed Venus table marking its appearances and disappearances with remarkable precision. It even accounts for the fact that 5 synodic cycles of Venus, about 584 days each on average, equal 8 solar years almost exactly, after which Venus returns to the same position in the sky on the same date. The Maya seem to use a value of 583.92 days for Venus's cycle, extremely accurate. How did they achieve this? Likely through patient observation over many decades, passed down through generations of astronomer priests. In our narrative scene, the priest has just witnessed Venus emerging in the pre-dawn, blazing over the eastern horizon like a diamond. It might be the first time Venus is visible after being behind the sun for many days. A heliacal rise of Venus. This is a moment of significance. The narrator might recount that among the Maya, such an event could signal something major, perhaps the time to inaugurate a new leader or to declare war. There is evidence that Maya rulers timed certain attacks or political moves to Venus cycles, believing them astrologically favorable or ordained by the gods of war. Now the priest shifts his gaze to the moon, a thin crescent setting in the west. The Maya had a lunar series in their calendar too, tracking lunar months, though their emphasis was more on the sun, Venus, and their own calendar cycles. He then looks for Mars, the reddish wanderer, which the Maya observed and noted. They recognized Mercury and Jupiter, and likely tracked their movements as well. The narrator describes how the Maya concept of time was incredibly elaborate and integrated with their cosmology. They maintained at least 3 calendars simultaneously. A 260-day sacred calendar known as the Tzolkin, in Aztec, Tonalpohualli. This consisted of 20-day names cycling with 13 numbers, an interlocking gear of 20 and 13 that produced 260 unique combinations. It had no tied relation to seasons, but was used for divination, the timing of religious events, naming of children. Their birthday on this cycle could influence their destiny, akin to a zodiac sign. A 365-day solar calendar called the Harb, Aztec, Xupohualli, which had 18 months of 20 days, plus a short 5-day period of ill omen at the end, the Wayabi. A long count linear calendar, which is the one with that famous 5-digit format, e.g. 13.0.0.0.0, that can pinpoint dates across thousands of years. This was used to record historical events, and the long count 0 date, the start of the current era, corresponds to August 11th, 3114 BC, in our Gregorian proleptic calendar. The narrator calmly walks through a scenario of how these calendars meshed. We hear how the passing days are noted by their Tzolkin name and number, 7 deer, 8 rabbit, 9 water, etc., and concurrently by Harb date, 5th day of the month of Pop, etc. Every day thus had 2 designations, like 2 wheels turning. Only once every 52 Harb years, which is 52 365 days, would the same Tzolkin and Harb combination repeat. This 52-year cycle was the calendar round. For the Maya, reaching 52 years was significant, not necessarily apocalyptic in their case, but a completed cycle, akin to a full turn of a giant gear. The narrator paints a picture of a Maya city celebrating such an event. Perhaps stelae, stone monuments, are erected with dates commemorating 52-year cycle completions and the deeds of rulers during that period. People dance in the plazas, confident that the flow of time continues in an orderly fashion. Meanwhile, scribes carve dates that also include the long count, ensuring that anyone in the far future, or far past, can know exactly which 52-year cycle this occurred in. This is how we today read Maya dates, and know, for example, that a certain king ascended the throne on 916.4.1.0 in long count, which equates to a specific day in AD chronology. One of the most remarkable things the narrator shares in a tone of quiet wonder is that the Maya had conceptions of time cycles far larger than even the long count's basic five-place notation. Some inscriptions mention dates millions of years in the past or future, essentially mythic timeframes to impress the idea that the cosmos had run long before humans and would continue long after. For instance, a monument at Quirigua, Guatemala, references a date about 400 million years in the future. The numbers boggle the mind and suggest the Maya had a view of an immense, repeating cosmos, somewhat resonant with the Hindu cycles we discussed earlier, though developed independently. Returning to the concrete sky, the Maya priest on the pyramid watches the constellation we call Orion rising. To him, perhaps this grouping of stars was part of a tortoise or some other figure. Some researchers think the three stars of Orion's belt were seen as part of a celestial hearth or turtle shell in Maya lore, but details are sparse. What we do know is that certain sightlines in Maya buildings align with Orion and other key stars. The narrator might mention the famous alignment at Uaxactun, where structures mark solstices and equinoxes, or how at Copan, stellae are oriented to the setting sun on specific dates. Chichen Itza, one of the great later cities, flourishing around 1000 AD, offers a vivid example of astronomical architecture, which our narration can bring to life. El Caracol, a round observatory-like tower with its narrow windows, is thought to have been used to view the horizon for important risings of Venus and other celestial events. We describe a priest within the tower, peering out of one of these slit windows just before dawn, aligning his eye with a notch in the distant tree line. At a particular morning, Venus will pop into view through this notch, and he will know it's time to signal the others that the sacred war ceremonies can commence. And then there's the Temple of Kukulkan, El Castillo, the Grand Pyramid at Chichen Itza. The narrator depicts the scene during the spring equinox. As the late afternoon sun begins to set, crowds gather at the base of the pyramid's north staircase. Slowly, a triangle of sunlight and shadow appears on the side of the stairway. With each passing minute, this pattern shifts, forming what looks like the body of a great serpent slithering down the pyramid. At the top of the staircase is a carved serpent head, and as the equinox sun aligns, the serpent's shadow body connects with its stone head at the base. The effect is striking. Kukulkan, or Quetzalcoatl in Nahuatl, the feathered serpent deity, is descending from the heavens to earth. The narrator's tone is reverent. Here we have myth, architecture, and astronomy in perfect synchrony. It's more than a tourist spectacle. For the ancient Maya, it likely was a deeply spiritual event, a reassurance that their city was built in tune with the universe and that their god was present. As evening deepens over the Yucatan, perhaps the Maya priest descends the pyramid to the plaza, where a ceremonial ball game is being played. The narrator gently notes that even this sport had cosmic undertones, symbolizing the battle between day and night, or life and death. The rubber ball's motion and the game's outcome might be connected to celestial cycles in myth. Recall the Maya hero twins story from the Popol Vuh, where they play ball with the lords of the underworld, eventually to rise triumphantly as sun and moon, or in some interpretations, as the sun and Venus. Yes, the Popol Vuh myth. The narrator can briefly recount it in a storytelling manner. Two brothers, the hero twins, descend to the underworld, Xibalba, to avenge their father, who was slain by underworld gods. Through wit and skill, they overcome many trials, including outplaying the gods in a ball game. Finally, they defeat the lords of death. To the surprise of all, they do not return to live on earth, but instead ascend. One becomes the sun, the other becomes the moon. In some versions, one might be Venus, but sun and moon is common. Thus, every day and night is a reflection of their victory and sacrifice. This is a core Maya creation, redemption story, tying cosmic movements to moral and spiritual themes. The narrator can lull us with this legend, perhaps describing a sunrise as the rebirth of one hero, and the following moonrise as the other twin lighting the night, always together, yet rarely seen at the same time, chasing each other in the sky as brothers might. The stars overhead are sometimes said to be lesser deities, or the heroes of other tales. Time now flows like a great river toward the post-classic era and central Mexico, where the Aztecs, or more correctly the Mexica, build a grand capital on an island in a lake. Tenochtitlan, the precursor of today's Mexico City. It's the 15th century, not truly classical in a global sense, but the tail end of ancient Mesoamerica just before European contact. However, culturally, the Aztecs see themselves inheriting the mantle of earlier civilizations, like the Toltecs and Maya. They look to the sky with the same awe and more martial fervor. The narrator sets the stage in Tenochtitlan. Night has fallen, and the city's bustle quiets. The great Templo Maya pyramid looms in the starlight, twin shrines on top, dedicated to Tlaloc, rain god, and Huitzilopochtli, sun, war god. If we listen carefully, we might hear drums or see torches moving in processions. The Aztecs often performed nightly rituals, including offering blood from their own ears or calves to nourish the gods. We focus on a particular extraordinary night that occurs once every 52 years, the new fire ceremony. The narrator's voice takes on a slightly suspenseful hush. The Aztecs believe that at the end of each 52-year cycle, the world is vulnerable to ending. According to their mythology, the gods had destroyed the world 4 times before, at the end of 4 previous sun eras. Now they lived in the 5th sun, which could end at any 52-year turnover if the gods so willed. As the last day of the cycle arrives, all fires in the empire are doused. Darkness falls over the Valley of Mexico like a heavy shroud. People discard their old cooking utensils, as everything old is symbolically finished. They fast and pray, fear and hope intermingling in their hearts. Our narration zeroes in on the slopes of the Hill of the Star, Huixachtlan, a mountain southeast of the capital where the climax will happen. Priests and a selected sacrificial victim ascend this hill in the dark. Thousands of pairs of eyes watch from the city, which lies in total blackness under a dome of brilliant stars. The critical moment is at hand. The constellation of Tianquistli, the Pleiades, which the Aztecs likened to a marketplace, or perhaps a gathering of sky gods, must reach the zenith at midnight. If the Pleiades passes directly overhead, it means the world will not end this night. The sun will rise again, and a new 52-year cycle will begin. If by some cosmic catastrophe, Pleiades is not where it should be, well, that would mean the cosmos has veered off course and the end is nigh. So the Aztec populace stands outside their homes, holding their breath and looking up. The narrator describes the emotional intensity. Mothers with young children clutched close, whispering prayers to Coyolxauhqui, the moon goddess, or to Quetzalcoatl, warriors silently gripping their obsidian blades not in warlike fury now, but in nervous devotion. The emperor himself, dressed in ritual regalia, waiting on top of the Templo Mayor with offerings prepared. Then, midnight. The Pleiades glitters straight overhead. A collective sigh of relief sweeps through the crowds. The priests on the mountain see it too. The world will continue. Immediately they perform the new fire ritual. The sacrificial victim, honored as the embodiment of the new age, is laid upon a stone altar. A flint knife flashes. The high priest opens the man's chest. The narrator mentions this softly, not dwelling graphically, focusing instead on the spiritual rationale. Amid chants, a new fire is drilled in his open chest cavity. Literally a fire-starting stick twirled until flame erupts, symbolically igniting from the heart of a human, like the heart of the world being rekindled. As the first sparks crackle into a flame, a great cheer echoes across the hills and lake. From every viewpoint in the valley, people see a tiny glow on Huixachtlan. The new fire is born. Runners who have been waiting with torches now light them from this sacred flame and sprint down the mountain trails, like shooting stars, streaking towards all directions. They carry the fire to Tenochtitlan and to outlying towns, where waiting priests use it to ignite new fires in temples and homes. In the narration, this becomes a triumphant, yet still reverent, moment. Darkness flees before the spreading points of light. In every neighborhood, hearths are lit anew, one by one, flickering warmly. The city awakens with illumination and joy. The sun will indeed rise at dawn. Huitzilopochtli has been nourished, and the cosmos is renewed for another round. Families feast, no longer fasting, and the next day is full of celebration. This new fire ceremony encapsulates how the Aztecs saw themselves as active participants in keeping the cosmos going. Through their ritual, they helped the sun to be reborn. As the narrator describes dawn after the new fire night, the sunrise holds special symbolism, the beginning of a new cycle. The sun comes up over the eastern mountains, and people weep with joy and relief, offering flowers and incense to greet its rays. In the soft morning light, one can see the capital's temples and palaces are freshly painted, perhaps even rebuilt if they were due, starting the cycle in renewed splendor. Aztec cosmology famously taught that we live under the fifth sun. The narrator can gently recount the Aztec creation myth of the five suns. In Teotihuacan, a mythical time-place of creation for the Aztecs, after the fourth sun had been destroyed, the gods gathered to birth a new world. But who would be the new sun? A noble god and a humble, sickly god both volunteered to sacrifice themselves. The proud god faltered at the last moment, while the humble deity leapt into the sacrificial fire and was transformed into the new sun. The ashamed noble god leapt after, becoming the moon, his brightness dimmed by another god throwing a rabbit at his face, which is why, the Aztecs said, the moon has a rabbit-shaped shadow and is less bright than the sun. Yet the sun did not move at first. It hung on the horizon, still as dawn. To set it in motion, the other gods sacrificed themselves, giving their divine blood to the sun. Thus the sun began to move, but it now required constant nourishment, and that duty fell to humans, the children of the gods. This myth justified the Aztec practice of human sacrifice on a mass scale. They believed that if they didn't feed the sun god with hearts and blood, he would lack the strength to rise and fight off the darkness. The narrator handles this with care. It's a grim aspect to convey soothingly. Perhaps emphasize the spiritual earnestness rather than gore. Say that the Aztecs felt a grave responsibility, a heavy but sacred burden, to reciprocate the god's sacrifice. The daily sunrise was evidence that they were succeeding, that balance was maintained. And those sacrificed were often captives of war or individuals who in their culture were given the honor of becoming one with the gods through death. It's tragic in human terms, but in their worldview, it was a holy consummation. One particular myth demonstrates the daily struggle. The story of Huitzilopochtli versus Coyolxauhqui that we earlier touched on. At each sunrise, Huitzilopochtli, the sun, defeats his sister, Coyolxauhqui, the moon, and his 400 brothers, the countless stars, who together represent the forces of night. The narrator might describe an Aztec stone carving, the famous Coyolxauhqui stone, found at the base of Templo Mayor. It depicts the moon goddess's dismembered body, with bells on her cheeks. Her name means painted with bells. This was likely the spot where the bodies of sacrificial victims, symbolically identified with Coyolxauhqui, were cast down the temple steps, reenacting the myth. By doing so, the Aztecs renewed the sun's victory. The narration approaches this obliquely and atmospherically. We might hear in our mind's ear the thud of a drum at dawn from the temple top, the chant of priests painted in blue or black, the scent of copal resin incense swirling upward as first light breaks. The narrator intones that at that moment they believed Huitzilopochtli was triumphing in the east, splitting the darkness, and they had played their part through the night's offerings. In a broader sense, Aztec star lore didn't consist of constellations like the Greco-Roman ones. Their night sky was interpreted through mythic episodes and calendar cycles. The Pleiades, for instance, had direct importance with the new fire, as we saw. They also recognized patterns like Mamalhuaztli, the fire drill constellation. Some say this was part of Orion's belt region, symbolizing the new fire drilling stick. The narrator could mention how when the Pleiades passed the zenith at that midnight, they also took note of the appearance of this fire drill pattern in the sky to light the new flame. It shows how they merged sky patterns with ritual implements conceptually. Another aspect is the Aztec sunstone, which, though often called a calendar stone, is essentially a cosmological chart. The narrator can evoke its imagery, a huge circular stone carving showing the face of Tonatiuh, the current sun, at the center, with his tongue out, depicting thirst for blood. Around him are glyphs of the 4 previous suns and their fates: 4 jaguar, 4 wind, 4 rain, 4 water. Those were the days on which each previous world ended by being devoured by jaguars, swept away by winds, burned by fire, and drowned by floods, respectively. The ring around contains the 20-day signs of the Aztec sacred calendar. Further rings show symbols for the cosmic regions, perhaps the stars or the Milky Way. It's a grand and intricate representation of time and space, according to Mexica belief. In our narrative's gentle style, we describe perhaps a young Aztec novice priest, tracing the carvings with his fingers at dawn, learning from his elder what each symbol means. He touches the rabbit in one panel, the ending of the second sun, devoured by jaguars. As the myth says, the sun turned into a rabbit, or something in one version. Then the next sign where mighty winds blew away humanity until they turned to monkeys, and so on. Through this stone, the novice learns that everything is cyclical and that his people live in a cosmic story much larger than themselves. The narrator might reflect that while this worldview is daunting, living in a universe that has ended 4 times and could again. It also gave the Aztecs purpose and identity. We are the people of the sun. We keep the cosmic clock ticking with our devotion. As the sunstone's face catches the rays of the rising sun, it glows, and the narrator signals that the night of Aztec star watching is over, just as our exploration of their lore draws to a close. Now, gradually, our perspective widens. We see in our mind's eye a composite panorama. Greek sailors navigating by the constellations over a wine-dark sea, Roman citizens gazing at a prophetic comet, Indian sages reciting star hymns by the Ganges, Maya priests marking a date in a codex as they watch Venus, Aztec priests kindling a sacrificial flame under a dome of stars. All these scenes, diverse in culture and era, share an underlying truth. Humanity everywhere has looked up at the same sky with wonder. The constellations and planet movements may be interpreted differently, enshrined in different myths, used for different calculations, but the impulse is the same: to find meaning and connection in the cosmos. Our narrator's voice becomes reflective, almost philosophical, yet maintaining that lulling quality. Under the constellations of Olympus, the Greeks married myth to observation, birthing astronomy as we know it. In Rome's imperial skies, the patterns of heaven were consulted to order calendars and confirm emperors' rights to rule. Beneath the stars of the Vedas, Indian sages sang of creation and measured time in celestial cycles, subtle and grand. And across the ocean, the Maya and Aztecs, through patient watching and fervent ritual, bound themselves to the cosmos, making the movements of heavenly lights the heartbeat of their civilizations. There is a sense of awe at how much these ancient cultures achieved in understanding and integrating the cosmos into their lives. For all their differences, one can also sense a common thread: a reverence for the sky, a need to explain it, to tell stories about it, and to use it as a guide. The narration emphasizes how mythic symbolism and celestial calculation weren't opposed, but often went hand in hand. A Greek temple might align to the sunrise on a hero's feast day, both a scientific alignment and a mythic homage. An Indian festival like Makar Sankranti marks the sun's northern journey, winter solstice transition, with ritual, science and myth entwined. They say the sun visits his son on that day, a story layered on an astronomical event. A Maya king's legitimacy might rest on his ability to predict an eclipse or a Venus rising, turning celestial calculation into political power, bolstered by mythic claim. He might say, "See, our patron deity told us through the sky that this victory was meant to be." As part 2 of our journey through cosmic origins comes to a close, we prepare to flow onward. We've strolled beneath the constellations of Olympus, followed Caesar's comet across Roman skies, traced the stars of the Vedas, and watched the calendar count reset among the pyramids of the New World. The night sky has been our constant companion, its myriad stories told in different tongues. There is a sensation, almost like standing at a vantage point above Earth, watching night slowly turn to day across continents, the Greek night giving way to dawn, then halfway around the world, the Maya dusk giving way to a starry night, a continuous tapestry of human wonder under the stars. And yet, there are still more chapters in our exploration of star lore. Knowledge would continue to accumulate, myths would travel and transform. The classical age would pass its wisdom to new scholars, from the Islamic astronomers who preserved and expanded Greek and Indian insights, to the navigators who would sail by the stars to connect the old and new worlds, to the Renaissance thinkers who would turn telescopes upward and unravel more cosmic secrets. The narration hints at this future continuum with a subtle excitement, but without jumping abruptly. It says, perhaps, our ancestors looked to the cosmos and began to see patterns. They told cosmic tales to make sense of it all. And as the torch of knowledge passed from one civilization to the next, the sky's secrets slowly revealed themselves further. The journey of understanding our cosmic origins was far from over. With that thought, we gently draw the curtain on part 2, leaving the listener in a state of calm enlightenment, reflective, perhaps imagining the stars above even as they close their eyes, ready to drift into a dream where Zeus's eagle, Caesar's comet, Vishnu's discus, and Quetzalcoatl's serpent of light all travel across the sky together in a grand, eternal dance. The narration has maintained a relaxing, slightly mysterious tone throughout, as promised, like a soft guide through a starry museum of human thought. And now it leaves the stage quietly as the cosmic story continues into the next part. Now, as our journey continues beyond familiar horizons, we venture into new realms of star lore and celestial wisdom. We have gazed at the ancient skies over distant civilizations, heard their legends, and followed their guides. Now the path leads us farther, to far-flung islands and the vastness of open ocean, to the frigid northern seas under dancing lights, and to the towering peaks where the Milky Way flows like a river. In these remote corners of the world, the stars continued to inspire, guide, and unite those who looked up in wonder. With hearts open to the night, we set sail once more, guided by celestial lights into the unknown. Far out on the calm waters of the Pacific Ocean, a double-hulled canoe glides under a dome of brilliant stars. The night air is warm and gentle. The sea stretches endlessly in all directions. No land in sight, only the meeting of water and sky at the far horizon. Standing at the stern is a navigator, a Polynesian wayfinder who knows these stars as intimately as a farmer knows his fields. He has no compass, no modern instruments, only the ancient wisdom passed down by his ancestors, teaching him how to read the night sky and the subtle cues of the sea. Above him, countless stars burn clear and bright, scattered across an ebony canvas. But he does not see them as random points of light. To him, the stars form a vast and reliable map. Each star's rising and setting on the horizon is like a familiar road sign on an invisible ocean highway. In his mind, he carries a star compass, an imaginary circle divided into segments by the points where key stars appear and disappear. As one guiding star sinks low in the west, he knows another will soon rise in the east to take its place, continuing the chain of guidance through the long night. On this night, the navigator watches a bright star emerge on the eastern horizon, just above the dark line of the sea. It is the star he has been waiting for, a beacon confirming that he is still on course. Gently, he calls out to the crew to adjust the sail ever so slightly. The canoe responds, veering a little to follow the path set by that rising star. Hours later, when that star climbs high and drifts toward the western horizon, another bright star will peak above the eastern waves, aligned with their intended path. Through the night, the navigator tracks these successive stars, each one appearing at a precise point along the horizon, each one a trusted guide. In this way, he steers the canoe along an unseen route across the open ocean, maintaining a steady direction with astonishing accuracy. Such mastery comes from years of training and continuous observation. As a young apprentice, this navigator once lay on his back in the canoe or on a sandy shore, night after night, memorizing the steady march of the heavens. He learned the names of dozens upon dozens of stars, and the exact direction each one would rise and set. In the traditional way, the horizon all around is divided into named houses or regions. A star rising in the house of the east will set in the opposite house of the west. By knowing these correspondences, a wayfinder can tell direction at any hour of night, even as the stars wheel and change. It is a skill that requires not just keen eyesight and memory, but a profound patience and trust in nature's patterns. Over time, the movements of the sky sink into the navigator's mind until they are as familiar as the path home. Imagine the scene on such a canoe, centuries ago. The crew either sleeps or paddles softly as needed, their silhouettes quiet against the starlight. Only the navigator remains fully awake, eyes tracing the glittering sky. He might hum a traditional chant under his breath, a song that lists the stars in the order they will appear through the night, forming a mnemonic sequence across the sky. The gentle rhythm of waves against the hull and the soft glow of starlight on the water create a meditative calm. He feels the slight swell of the ocean too, the way the canoe rises and falls with the long waves. His training has taught him that the swells carry information. Certain steady wave patterns come from the direction of distant islands or prevailing winds. By sensing the pattern of waves, even with eyes closed, a skilled navigator can detect if the canoe's heading has subtly changed. Every element of nature becomes part of the guidance system. The stars, first and foremost, but also the sea and swell, the wind, and even the flight of birds at dawn. Overhead, familiar star patterns mark the seasons and also signal the canoe's latitude. The navigator knows that as they travel farther north or south, some stars will climb higher in the sky, while others sink lower or disappear below the horizon. Near the equator, the stars of both the northern and southern skies are visible, but far to the south, a certain famous star of the north disappears entirely. Polaris, the North Star, a fixed point for navigators in other lands, drops below the horizon once one sails too deep into the southern hemisphere. Yet, long ago in the more northerly Polynesian islands like Hawaii, voyagers could still glimpse Polaris, tiny and low in the north. They named it Hokupa'a, the fixed star, for unlike other stars, it stayed nearly motionless, always hovering in the north as a reliable anchor point. In other parts of Polynesia, where Polaris could not be seen, navigators instead relied on the Southern Cross. That small cross of 4 bright stars in the southern sky rotates around an invisible southern pole. By learning how the cross's angle and height above the horizon change through the night, a wayfinder can use it to find the south and maintain orientation, even without a visible pole star. The sky offers different signs in different regions, but always some guidance to those who know where to look. To the Polynesian navigator, the night sky is alive with helpful lights and storied figures. High above, the graceful curve of the constellation we know as Scorpius arcs across the tropical darkness. In those stars, Polynesian eyes perceive the shape of a great fishhook. They call it Manaiakalani, the magical fishhook of the demigod Maui. As one legend tells it, Maui cast this divine hook deep into the ocean and snagged it on the ocean floor. When he pulled with all his might, he hauled up entire islands from beneath the sea, new land for people to live on. Even now, on clear nights when Scorpius rises, its tail and curved hook shape remind Polynesian sailors of Maui's fishhook catching the ocean floor. It is a comforting and inspiring sight. If new islands lie ahead beyond the horizon, surely the hook of Maui will help guide the voyager toward them. Elsewhere in the sky, other stars and constellations carry their own meanings. The Southern Cross, with its 4 bright stars, is seen not as a Christian symbol here, but often as something familiar to seafarers: an anchor. In Maori tradition in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the Southern Cross is called Te Punga, the anchor of the sky canoe. They imagine the entire Milky Way as a great celestial waka canoe sailing across the night, with the cross as its anchor and the bright pointer stars, Alpha and Beta Centauri, as the rope securing the anchor to the canoe. To Pacific navigators, it is as if there are canoes above and canoes below, the people's vessels traversing the ocean, mirroring a heavenly vessel that journeys across the stars. Such imagery binds their everyday life to the cosmos. The sea, the canoe, the sky, all are woven together in one continuum. For Polynesians, the stars were not only tools for navigation, but also an integral part of their calendar and spiritual life. Certain stars or star clusters signaled times of year and seasonal transitions. When the small cluster of Matariki, known elsewhere as the Pleiades, reappeared in the eastern pre-dawn sky, it marked the new year in many Polynesian cultures. After being hidden by the sun's glare for weeks, the first dawn rising of Matariki was greeted with celebrations and thanksgiving. Families would rise early to peer at the horizon, awaiting those delicate sparkles of light. A bright and clear appearance of Matariki foretold an abundant year of crops and fish. A hazy or dim appearance might warn of lean times ahead. Thus, the sky served as a celestial calendar and provided omens for life below. Each year, the stars renewed their cycle, reminding people when to plant, when to harvest, when certain fish would spawn or certain fruits ripen. The universe above was intimately tied to the cycles of the islands. Guided by these stars and their deep knowledge of winds and waves, Polynesians achieved voyages that to outsiders seemed almost magical. Long before Europeans crossed any ocean, Polynesian explorers had voyaged across the Pacific, discovering and settling far-flung islands that dot that immense blue expanse. They travelled from Tahiti to Hawaii, a journey of over 2,500 miles, and from the Marquesas all the way down to Aotearoa, New Zealand, navigating by nothing more than what the sky and sea offered. There are even tantalizing hints that these voyagers reached the coasts of South America. The presence of the South American sweet potato throughout Polynesia and the finding of Polynesian-style chicken bones in Peru and Chile suggest that their canoes may have made landfall there. If so, Polynesian navigators truly connected far-distant worlds, carrying their wayfinding genius across the entire Pacific, with only nature and the stars as their guide. As the night on our imagined canoe journey stretches on, the navigator remains vigilant. Hours pass peacefully. The canoe slices through calm seas, and the heavens wheel slowly overhead. Eventually, the eastern sky grows lighter as the first hint of dawn approaches. One by one, the stars that steered them through the darkness begin to fade into the growing glow. The navigator notes the final positions of key stars as they vanish, fixing the canoe's course in his mind relative to where they left off. He knows he has kept the vessel on course through the night. With the stars gone, he turns his attention to the colour of the sky and sea. In the pale light, he scans the horizon. There, could that be a faint smudge against the morning sky? Or a small cloud sitting still and tall on the horizon, illuminated pink by the rising sun? His pulse quickens slightly. To the untrained eye, it might be nothing, but he recognizes the significance. A stationary cloud can mean an island below, as the sun's warmth causes moisture to rise from forested land and form a cap of cloud. He looks for other signs, the flight of birds darting across the dawn sky. Seabirds at first light often head out to sea from their roosts on shore, travelling a predictable distance to fish. The navigator observes a flock of birds winging purposefully from one patch of the horizon in toward the open sea, likely coming from land behind them. There is also a subtle shift in the pattern of the swells, the way the waves are refracting, bending, ever so gently from a particular direction. That too hints at an island disturbing the normal flow of the ocean. With a confident smile, the navigator knows that land is not far now. As the golden light of morning grows, he shares the news with the crew. The signs are there. The men who are sleeping now stir and look ahead, squinting. In time, as the sun climbs higher, they all see it. On the horizon, a green bump appears, growing more solid every minute. The canoe erupts in quiet celebration and relief. After days or weeks on the open ocean, guided faithfully by the stars, they have reached their destination. Perhaps it is a known atoll they sought, or a new island never before seen by their people. In either case, the feat is extraordinary. Across hundreds of miles of empty sea, they navigated to a tiny target, all by holding the cosmos as their compass. Later, when the canoe lands and the voyagers step onto solid ground, the navigator's role will be honored in ceremonies of gratitude. Offerings might be made to the gods and to the ancestors, thanking them for clear skies and guiding lights. Songs will be sung of this journey, adding to the rich oral history of ocean voyages. And in those songs the stars will feature prominently, forever tied to the story of how the people found their way. Generations upon generations made such journeys, and over time the star lore only deepened. This knowledge was carefully guarded and passed on, often in secret, from master navigator to chosen apprentice. A navigator might train only a select few in his lifetime, sharing the sacred knowledge when he felt the student was ready to bear the responsibility. Training involved not just memorizing star maps, but also developing an intuitive feel for the ocean. Teachers would draw the star compass in the sand, using shells or stones to mark where important stars rose and set. They would recite endless sequences of star names corresponding to directions and times of night. Only after years of mentorship, and perhaps a successful voyage under supervision, would the apprentice be considered a master wayfinder himself. There was a spiritual dimension to this art. The wayfinder often held the role of a priest or sacred navigator, bridging the natural world and the divine. In Polynesian belief, all the elements of nature, the sea, the sky, the winds, the stars, possess a living spirit. Navigating by them meant communing with these spirits. It demanded respect, humility, and clarity of mind. Before voyages, navigators would often pray or meditate, seeking harmony with the environment and guidance from the ancestral gods. Out on the ocean at night, beneath the infinity of stars, one cannot help but feel a sense of awe and connection to something greater. In that vast darkness, the navigator is never truly alone. He is in the company of the heavens and the echoes of those who voyaged before. Even after compasses and sextants were introduced to the Pacific, the legacy of the Polynesian wayfinders lived on, sometimes quietly. By the mid-20th century, however, with modern navigation widely used, only a handful of traditional master navigators remained, and the art was at risk of fading away. But then came a renaissance. In the 1970s, a group of Hawaiians and other Polynesians, determined to reconnect with their heritage, built a voyaging canoe using traditional designs and materials. They named her Hokulea, after the zenith star of Hawaii, which is Arcturus, a guiding star that passes overhead at the latitude of the Hawaiian Islands. In 1976, Hokulea set sail from Hawaii to Tahiti, guided solely by traditional wayfinding techniques. No compass, no charts, relying only on the sun, stars, winds, and waves. At the helm was Nainoa Thompson, a Hawaiian navigator trained by a master from Micronesia, Mau Piailug, one of the last grandmasters who still carried the ancient knowledge. The success of that voyage, landfall in Tahiti after 30 days at sea, astonished those who had doubted the old ways. It ignited pride across Polynesia, as tens of thousands of people in Tahiti welcomed the canoe, celebrating the return of their ancestral voyagers. Since that historic journey, Hokulea and other canoes have sailed across the world, proving again that these ancient methods are reliable and profound. Modern students continue to learn the old songs of the stars, the feel of the swells, the reading of subtle signs, a deep bond between ocean and sky. With each voyage, they reconnect with the spirit of their ancestors. Under the very same stars that guided the first navigators, a new generation experiences the calm and wonder of finding their way by nature's cues. The tradition lives, carrying forward the wisdom that the earth and sky themselves will guide us if we know how to listen. The story of Polynesian wayfinding shows us a people who learn to live in intimate conversation with the cosmos. By navigating with starlight, they tied their fate and future to the rhythm of celestial bodies. There is exquisite poetry in that image. A canoe on a dark, glittering ocean, guided by tiny points of light shining across billions of miles. It reminds us that even on Earth's widest oceans, people were never truly lost or alone as long as they could find a star to steer by. In the Polynesians' relationship with the night sky, we see the heavens not as a distant void, but as a familiar realm full of friends and guides. Now our voyage through the tapestry of star lore is about to carry us from these warm Pacific waters to a very different sea. We leave behind the gentle tropics and sail toward colder winds and longer nights. The next part of our journey unfolds beneath the auroras and the boreal stars of the far north, among a seafaring people who looked up at the same sky and found their own North Star to follow. The night is deep and cold over the North Atlantic. 1,000 years ago, a Viking longship ploughs through black waters capped with white foam. Above, the sky of the far north glitters with stars sharper than ice. Standing near the prow, a navigator pulls his cloak tighter against the chill wind. He searches the heavens for his lodestar. There it is, Polaris, the North Star, shining steadily just above the horizon off the ship's bow. In these latitudes, Polaris is a faithful ally, hanging in the northern sky as a fixed point. The helmsman adjusts the rudder slightly, keeping the North Star in the correct position relative to the ship's course. As long as that star remains in its place, they know they are steering true, holding their intended bearing across the dark sea. For the Vikings, Polaris was known by a name that reflects exactly what it was to them. Leidastiana, the leading star, the lodestar. Night after night on open water, this little star helped them orient themselves. If they wanted to sail due west, they would keep Polaris directly off their right-hand side, off the starboard. To sail south, they would keep Polaris behind them, dropping lower in the sky the farther south they went. Beyond direction finding, the North Star also quietly hinted at their latitude. As they travelled north, Polaris climbed higher overhead. As they went south, it sank lower. Savvy navigators understood this, and some would sail along a line of latitude by keeping Polaris at a constant height above the horizon. For instance, to reach a land to the west, known to lie at the same latitude as their home, they would first sail north or south until Polaris sat at the right elevation. Then they would turn westward, making sure Polaris neither rose nor fell in the sky during their journey. In this way, they could, in theory, ride a line of latitude across the ocean, an impressive feat for an age with no instruments. On clear nights, when an expanse of stars spread from horizon to horizon, Viking sailors had many celestial guides. The Big Dipper, 7 bright stars forming a bowl and handle, was one of the most recognizable. The Norse called this constellation Karlsvagn, meaning Karl's wagon, or the man's chariot. They saw it as a great wagon eternally circling the sky. Night by night, as it pivoted around the North Star, it was as if a cosmic wheel turned above the earth. In spring and summer, when the wagon hung low or never fully set, the Vikings knew the seasons of sailing and raiding were at hand. In autumn, when it swung high overhead in the early evening, they felt winter coming. Polaris, the wagon's axle, kept everything turning around the hub. In the far north, seasonal light and darkness themselves could reach extremes. During summer, at high latitudes, the sun barely set at all, creating the midnight sun, when day and night blurred together and the sky never truly grew dark. Only the brightest stars might appear in the prolonged twilight. Conversely, in the depths of winter, night swallowed most of the 24 hours, and stars could sometimes be seen even at midday in a dusky sky. The Vikings took these phenomena in stride. They marveled at summer's everlasting dusk and adapted to winter's long darkness, making use of whatever cues they could: faint star glimmers, subtle changes in daylight, to mark time and direction when the usual celestial guides were not available. Their hardy experience with the sky's changing rhythms gave them confidence to roam even in latitudes where ordinary navigation grew tricky. Other familiar signposts appeared with the seasons. In winter months, the constellation of Orion rose high on crisp, clear nights. The 3 stars of Orion's belt were especially prominent, shining in a row. Norse people had their own names for this asterism. In some Nordic regions, it was called Frigg's distaff, imagining those 3 stars as the spindle of the goddess Frigg, who spins the clouds. In other places, the same 3 stars were seen as Fiskikarlar, the fishermen, perhaps 3 fishermen eternally rowing across the sky. One can easily picture Viking folk on a winter night pointing up at Orion's belt and telling these tales to their children, stories to accompany the long darkness. The Pleiades star cluster, a tiny swarm of stars nearby, was another noteworthy sight. The Norse knew this little cluster simply as the star, stjärna in Old Norse, because on long winter nights it was a key reference for timekeeping. When the Pleiades rode high in the sky, it signalled midnight, and its seasonal appearance marked the progression of the cold months. Seeing the Pleiades in autumn told them winter was coming. Seeing it fade in spring dawns meant winter's end. At sea, however, practicality ruled. The Vikings navigated the North Atlantic using every scrap of knowledge nature provided. By day, they observed the sun's path and used simple sun shadow boards to estimate direction. By night, Polaris and the circumpolar stars were their compass. They also watched the behavior of the waves, the direction of prevailing winds, and the flight of birds. One tale from the sagas describes a navigator releasing ravens from his ship to find land. knowing that a freed raven will fly straight toward the nearest coastline. According to legend, when Floki Vilgadarsson sailed in search of Iceland, he carried ravens with him. Out on the open sea, he let them loose. One flew back toward the Faroe Islands they had departed, but another flapped westward and did not return. Floki changed course to follow that raven, and soon enough he found the coastline of Iceland rising on the horizon. Such were the clever techniques that complemented star guidance. Even with all their skill, the Vikings faced nights when the sky offered no clues. Clouds could blanket the stars for days. In these moments, they turned to lore of a different kind. Some accounts speak of the Solstein, or sunstone, a fabled crystal that could reveal the hidden sun. By holding this translucent stone, possibly calcite, up to the overcast sky and rotating it, a navigator might see a pattern of polarized light that marked the sun's position, even through clouds or fog. In modern times, we know this is scientifically plausible with Iceland's spar, a form of calcite, which can polarize light. To the Vikings, it must have seemed like a little bit of magic or divine favor, an invisible sunbeam captured in a stone. Using such tricks during the day and praying for clear skies at night, they managed to traverse leagues of treacherous ocean. Consider a voyage of Viking explorers venturing farther than any of their kin. Westward, to a new continent. Around the year 1000, Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, set sail from Greenland, heading for a land hinted at in earlier stray voyages. One can imagine Leif's crew on deck at night, breath visible in the frigid air, eyes turned upward. The North Star guides them steadily as they cross unknown waters. Night after night, they keep Polaris over the starboard rail, steering southwest by west. The seas grow rough at times, and the air bites cold, but the sky remains mostly clear. They pass the point where they expect to see land based on previous tales, yet there is none in sight. Still, they trust their guidance. Finally, one morning, the lookout shouts. Low on the horizon lies a shoreline of dense forests. The New World, Vinland. The Vikings had crossed the Atlantic to North America nearly 5 centuries before Columbus, using only the tools of nature and their own wits. Stars, sun, wind, birds, all brought them to that shore. Sitting by their fires after such voyages, the Norse had ample time to reflect on the heavens that had carried them. In their sagas and songs, they wove the stars and celestial phenomena into the fabric of myth. The Norse cosmos was a grand, living thing. They imagined the earth, Midgard, as just one of 9 worlds connected by the great world tree, Yggdrasil. And what of the stars and sky? In their creation story, the firmament above was formed from the skull of a primeval giant named Ymir. When Ymir was slain by Odin and his brothers at the dawn of time, they set his skull up as the dome of the heavens. To hold it in place, they stationed 4 dwarfs at the 4 cardinal directions, east, west, north, and south, like cosmic pillars. The stars themselves, the Norse said, were sparks from the fiery realm of Muspel, the world of fire, that were caught in the skull dome and placed there by the gods to light the night. Each flickering star was literally a bit of primordial fire, repurposed to adorn the sky. With such an origin, the stars naturally found their way into many tales. One legend speaks of a giant named Thiassi, who met his end at the hands of the gods. As compensation for his death, Odin took Thiassi's eyes, bright and fierce, and set them in the sky. His eyes became 2 stars, forever gazing down from the heavens. Another story tells of the hero Orvandil. Thor, the thunder god, was carrying Orvandil home from a perilous journey in a basket. As they waded through an icy river, one of Orvandil's toes protruded and froze solid. In a strange act of care, and perhaps humour, Thor broke off the frozen toe and hurled it into the sky, where it became a star. Thus, Orvandil's toe was immortalized among the constellations. Some later storytellers mused that this star might be the bright spark of Sirius, or perhaps Venus. But in truth the myth doesn't specify, leaving it a little mystery glinting in the night. To the Norse mind, nearly every element of nature was alive, or connected to a greater narrative. The sun and moon themselves were personified as Sol and Mani, forever riding chariots across the sky. In their myth, Sol and Mani are chased relentlessly by giant wolves. Skjold chases the sun, and Hati pursues the moon. When either celestial orb was eclipsed or reddened, the Norse thought perhaps the wolf had caught up for a brief moment to take a bite. And in the final days of the world, during Ragnarok, it was said the wolves would at last catch their prey. The sun would be devoured, the moon too, and the stars would vanish from the sky. Darkness would cover the world, as the great tree Yggdrasil trembled, and the gods met their fate in battle. But the story does not end there. After the doom, a new world is foretold to arise from the sea, and with it, new sun and stars. Even in their fierce apocalyptic visions, the Norse saw the cosmic lights eventually returning, renewed. On gentler nights, one could look up and see a milky band stretching across the sky. The Milky Way, a pale pathway of stars. The Norse called it Vetrabraut, the winter road, and in folklore it was sometimes known as the road to hell or the path of the dead. They believed it might be the route that souls travelled to the afterlife, a ghostly bridge arching overhead. Others associated it with Bifrost, the rainbow bridge. By day, Bifrost was envisioned as the rainbow connecting Earth to Asgard, the realm of the gods. By night, perhaps that bridge became the shimmering river of stars, still linking worlds. In the far north, another ethereal light sometimes graced the sky, curtains of green and red flickering silently, the aurora borealis. The northern lights were a source of wonder and some unease. Imagine a Viking family standing outside their timber hall, watching the aurora dance. To them, these lights might be the glow from Valhalla, or the glitter of Valkyrie's armour as they gallop across the sky. Some thought the aurora was reflections off the shields of the Valkyries escorting fallen warriors. Others might have seen it as the spirits of the dead themselves, rejoicing and shimmering. In any case, these lights were woven into the tapestry of nighttime marvels that the Norse experienced and tried to explain with stories. Not all star lore was so grand. Some was practical and rooted in daily life. For instance, the star we call Arcturus, a bright golden star that appears in the late winter and spring sky, had special significance. At high latitudes, during certain times of the year, Arcturus rises in the east just before dawn. In Norway and Iceland, people noticed that on very long winter nights, this star's rise signalled that morning was finally nearing. They named Arcturus Dagstjerne, the day star, because its appearance heralded the coming of daylight. In the deep darkness of winter, to see that friendly golden star peep above the horizon must have lifted spirits. It was a promise that the sun was right behind, ready to return. Thus the stars served the Norse in many ways, as clock and compass, as calendar and compass, and as inspiration for rich storytelling. We can picture a group of Viking sailors, after a hearty evening meal on shore, reclining and pointing out the constellations. One man traces the outline of the wagon, another recounts how those stars got there, another points to a fuzzy cluster, the Pleiades, and everyone nods, knowing winter's onset. Then perhaps the group falls silent, each person lost in the infinity above, feeling simultaneously small and connected to something vast. On those long winter nights, families huddled around the hearth would often glance up at the brilliant sky through a small window or the smoke hole in the roof. One can imagine a Norse elder, wrapped in furs, pointing out the snowy arc of the Milky Way to wide-eyed children, perhaps calling it the Ghost Road, or explaining that it leads to distant realms. He might show them Orion's belt low on the horizon and tell them its Norse name, or reassure them that the gentle day star will bring dawn. In the warmth of their timber lodge, the family found comfort and wonder in these starry tales, drawing a sense of protection from the sparkling sky above. The legacy of the Norse and Viking relationship with the sky is subtle but enduring. Even today, we inherit words like lodestar for a guiding principle or inspiration, not realizing it harkens back to sailors keeping Polaris ever in view. Their understanding of seasons and navigation contributed to charts and calendars as the medieval world progressed. For example, an Icelandic farmer astronomer known as Star Oddi Helgason, in the 12th century, made detailed observations of the sun and stars and created tables to predict the timing of solstices and the length of daylight throughout the year. This work shows that even as the sagas were being written, some Norse scholars were treating astronomy as a science. But beyond practical matters, the sense of wonder they felt still echoes. We too can step outside on a cold, clear night and see the very same North Star they followed, the same Orion's belt they named, the same misty Milky Way. In that moment, time fades, and we share an experience with those long-ago people. The simple, profound act of looking up at the stars and finding meaning. Under the North Star's patient light, the Vikings explored and expanded to new lands. Under that same light, they spun yarns of gods and heroes, finding patterns in the sky to soothe and spark the imagination during long winter evenings. As we leave the northern seas now, we carry with us the image of a dragon-proud longship cutting through starlit waters, a steady light ahead, guiding it onward. Our journey continues, heading southward and westward to a different world of mountains and sky, the high Andes, where peoples of the sun and earth saw their own forms in the constellations overhead. High in the Andes, the air is thin and clear. On a moonless night above the ancient city of Cusco, the sky unfurls in breathtaking clarity. Stars spangle the darkness by the millions, and across the center of the sky arches a broad, cloudy band of light. This is the Milky Way, and to the Inca and their predecessors, it was Mayu, the celestial river. According to Inca myth, at the dawn of time, the world lay in darkness until the creator god, Viracocha, rose from the sacred waters of Lake Titicaca. He brought forth the sun, the moon, and all the stars from beneath the lake, so that they would illuminate the sky. From that moment, water and light were bound together in the Inca imagination. Far below in the valley, the earthly Urubamba River coils through the sacred valley of the Inca. In their worldview, this winding river is a mirror to the heavenly one above. The Inca believed that the Milky Way was the origin of all waters. Its flow in the sky was the source feeding rain and rivers on earth. Looking up, one can almost feel that cosmic river pouring life down onto the mountains. In the stillness of a high-altitude night, The Milky Way glistens from horizon to horizon, and its reflection seems to twinkle in the winding Urubamba far below, as if sky and earth are locked in a gentle conversation. Gazing at this band of light, the Inca did something intriguing. Where many cultures connect the dots of bright stars to form figures, the Inca often saw shapes in the darkness itself. The Milky Way is not uniformly bright. Dark blotches and gaps mar its glow, caused by great clouds of cosmic dust. The Inca called these dark patches Yana Fuyu, meaning dark clouds. And in these celestial dark clouds, they saw silhouettes of the animals and objects that populated their world. It is as if the Inca looked at the negative space of the heavens, finding form in the void. One of the most important of these dark constellations is the Jacana, the Black Llama. Look closely at the Milky Way near the Southern Cross and the bright star Alpha Centauri on a clear July or August night. There you might discern a llama's shape, a large shadow among the stars. The mother llama stretches out, and a little baby llama, Unalamacha, appears nestled at her side, suckling. The two gleaming stars, Alpha and Beta Centauri, shine like the mother llama's watchful eyes. According to Andean lore, this celestial llama is the guardian of all llamas on Earth. A myth recounts that in ancient times, a giant black llama descended from the sky to drink up all the water on Earth's surface, from every spring, lake, and river, and even taking great gulps from the ocean. It did so to prevent a great flood, lapping up the excess water that threatened to drown the world. The people upon whom the llama descended were blessed with its gift of beautiful wool and great fortune as thanks. Ever since, Jacana resides in the sky, and it is said that when the llama constellation stands high and clear, the llamas in the fields below thrive under its care. Even today, Quechua herders will point out the lamita in the heavens, proud that one of their most beloved animals lives among the stars. The llama is not alone in the sky river. Emerging from other dark hollows of the Milky Way are a host of animals familiar to the Andean people. There is Macaquay, the serpent, a wavy black ribbon that winds through the Milky Way's dark rift. When the season comes that the serpent constellation slithers into prominence, rising headfirst around August, the Inca knew that snakes on the ground would soon become more active. Macaquay was said to oversee all snakes and vipers on Earth, and offerings were made by the Inca to this constellation to protect people from snake bites. Another dark constellation is Hampatu, the toad, crouching in the sky as a dark smudge. And one known as Luthu, the partridge, some say a tinamou bird, is found near the dark edges of Scorpius. These creatures were not random. They corresponded with animals that played roles in the Andean ecosystem and agriculture. Toads, serpents, and birds help control pests and maintain balance in the fields. In the Inca imagination, their essences were etched into the heavens, ensuring those helpful beings were enshrined above and could be venerated. One of the more dramatic sky stories involves Atok, the fox. Atok's form is a dark constellation located near where the Milky Way's broad band meets the pattern we know as Scorpius. The fox has two deep red stars for its eyes. Some say one of them is Antares, the red heart of the scorpion, lending its hue to the fox's gaze. In the stories, this sly fox is a bit of a villain. He lurks in the sky near the llama, intending to sneak up and prey on the llama's defenseless baby. But the fox does not have free rein. Across from him stands Meshech, the shepherd. Many say this celestial shepherd is a woman, since in Andean communities women traditionally own the llama flocks, while men tend them. This shepherd extends her arms towards the llamas, and her legs stretch out near the paws of the fox, as if she is trying to scare the fox away. On a clear night, one can imagine her silhouette in the stars, a protective figure, arms outstretched in a gesture of guardianship over the sky llamas. This cosmic tableau of llama, baby, fox, and shepherd was rich with meaning for the Inca. It spoke of protection and balance, of the eternal interplay between the nurturer and the trickster, all enacted in silent shadow among the stars. Unlike the static groupings of stars, which the Inca saw as distant and inanimate, these dark cloud constellations were considered alive and influential. They were thought to actively affect their earthly counterparts, just as Makakue governed snakes and Yakana watched over llamas. People felt a personal relationship with these celestial beings. When the dark constellations rose or set at particular times of year, rituals often accompanied those moments. If the llama in the sky was absent, hidden by daylight or by the sun's seasonal path, herders on earth might grow uneasy, as if their guardian were away. When the llama shape appeared vividly again, it was taken as a propitious sign for the herds. Through the year, these star animals come one after another, almost like a procession of spirits arriving at the celestial river to drink, just as real animals visit the watering holes on earth. Once their thirst is quenched, they depart, sinking beyond the horizon until their season comes again. While the dark constellations were central to Andean star lore, the Inca did not ignore the star patterns drawn by the stars themselves. They too had bright star constellations, although they regarded them as more remote and less animated than the dark figures. One prominent grouping of bright stars is the Southern Cross. This small but striking cross of 4 stars, hanging in the southern sky, was noted by the Inca and became associated with a key Andean symbol. They called it Chacana, which means the stair or bridge. The Chacana, often depicted as a stepped cross motif in Inca art, symbolized the link between the upper world, middle world, and underworld, sky, earth, and underworld. To see a literal cross in the sky reinforced their belief in a cosmic order. Interestingly, the dark gap adjacent to the Southern Cross, what modern astronomy identifies as the Coalsack Nebula, was also incorporated into myth. One tale says that the god Viracocha, in a fit of temper, kicked the Milky Way, and a piece of it was dislodged, landing as the small Magellanic Cloud and leaving the black mark of the Coalsack behind as a scar. It was another creative attempt to explain the subtle features of the night. Besides the Southern Cross, other star groupings had significance. The Pleiades, for example, though small and easy to overlook next to the bright constellations of summer, held outsized importance in the Andes. The Inca name for the Pleiades was Kulka, meaning storehouse. The heliacal rising of this cluster, its first appearance at dawn after weeks of absence, occurred in June and essentially signaled the Inca New Year, marking the transition from the dry season to the wet season. The Inca watched Kulka's reappearance with intense interest. If the cluster's stars looked clear and bright, it was seen as a sign that the year's rains would be plentiful and the harvest abundant. The celestial storehouse was full. If the Pleiades appeared dim or fuzzy, perhaps obscured by high clouds, they feared drought or poor crops might follow, and they would take precautions, performing ceremonies to beseech the gods for better weather or adjusting their planting schedule. It's remarkable to think of farmers forecasting the climate by gazing at a tiny cluster of stars. Yet in the high Andes, this method proved meaningful enough to persist through generations. The Inca were excellent sky watchers, not only by night, but also by day. They built pillars and towers to track the sun's seasonal movement, ensuring they knew exactly when solstices and equinoxes arrived. But at night, they devised clever ways to observe the heavens as well. In Cusco, it's said that there were special reflecting pools of water in which priests would watch the stars, the still black water doubling the sky and perhaps making faint stars more visible. This way, they could comfortably study the heavens by looking down, as if reading a mirror. All across their empire, the Inca established sightlines and observation points aligned with celestial events, integrating the cosmos into architecture and city planning. In Cusco, the great temple of the sun, Coricancha, was constructed with windows that caught the light of the June solstice sunrise, and channels through which the bright stars of the Pleiades could be observed at specific times, ensuring that ceremonies could be timed perfectly with the cosmic calendar. Furthermore, Cusco was the center of a vast cosmic grid. 41 invisible lines, called seques, radiated out from the city like spokes. Each seque connected a sequence of shrines, huacas, in the landscape, and many of these shrines were aligned to significant sunrises, sunsets, or star positions on key dates of the agricultural and ritual calendar. Through this seq system, the Inca wove the rhythm of the heavens into the very geography of their realm, using the sky to organize time, space, and society. To the Inca, their emperor was the son of the sun, and indeed the sun was the primary deity. But the stars and cosmic phenomena were deeply woven into their spiritual and practical life as well. They saw the cosmos as a unified whole, with every element influencing the others. Nothing demonstrated this interconnected worldview more than their reverence for that silvery river in the sky, Mayu, and its reflection on Earth. When the rainy season began in November, the Milky Way at dusk lay nearly horizontal across the sky, like a swollen river, and rains soon followed, as though poured from that celestial stream. In the dry season of May and June, the Milky Way stood nearly vertical in the evenings, as if the river had emptied and flowed downward, corresponding to a time of little rain. The sky's patterns were synchronized with Earth's cycles of wet and dry, reinforcing the belief that what happened above directly affected life below. As the night unfolds over the Andes, one can imagine an Inca astronomer priest atop a stone platform, observing the myriad points of light. Perhaps he murmurs a prayer to Viracocha, the great creator, or to Inti, the sun, thanking them for the celestial signs that guide their people. Around him, the cold night is kept at bay by a thick alpaca wool cloak, and he occasionally consults a bowl of water at his feet where the stars shimmer in reflection. In a nearby village, farmers waking early to check the horizon for Kulkar's return shuffle out of their adobe homes, breath misting, hopeful to see the sparkle that promises good rains. A child tending llamas at night glances upward and easily spots the outline of the great black llama above, feeling comfort that the sky herd watches over the herd on Earth. Even after the Spanish conquest, many of these traditions quietly endured. To this day, Quechua communities in the high Andes continue to celebrate the heliacal rising of the Pleiades in late May or early June, with ceremonies, dancing, and all-night vigils. For example, each year around May's end, thousands of Quechua pilgrims undertake a journey into the high mountains for the Koilua Riti festival, Snow Star, in Quechua. Through a freezing night near 16,000 feet, they dance and sing in Quechua to honor a brilliant star that appears above a sacred glacier. Many carry Christian icons introduced by the Spanish, yet intertwined with them is the ancient reverence for the celestial. Before dawn, groups of devout climbers scale the ice, cutting blocks of the glacier to carry on their backs. As morning twilight bathes the peaks and the last stars fade, the pilgrims bear these heavy blocks of star ice down to their villages, believing that water from the sacred glacier, infused with starlight, will bless their crops and herds. Such rituals, blending new faith with old cosmic beliefs, show how strongly the connection to the heavens endures in Andean life. Through the lens of Andean constellations and traditions, we see yet another example of humanity's intimate dialogue with the night sky. The people of the Andes looked up at the sparkling firmament and saw a reflection of their own world. Llamas, shepherds, foxes, and serpents. The water that gives life. The cycles of planting and harvest. The cosmos was not a distant, cold expanse. It was a living panorama that spoke to them, that guided their calendars and guarded their flocks. Under the brilliant Andean sky, illuminated by both stars and the dark shapes between them, they found assurance that the heavens cared for the earth. As we prepare to leave the heights of the Andes, we carry with us a sense of the profound unity the Inca perceived between our world and the cosmos. We have travelled, in this part, from the sea-level horizons of Polynesia, through the northern isles of the Vikings, and up to the peaks of the Inca realm, and in each place found the night sky richly alive. Now, as our journey draws to a close, we descend from the mountains and return our gaze to the sky as a whole, reflecting on the shared human connection that threads through all these stories of the stars. Truly, every culture on Earth has woven its own story into the stars. We have touched only a few in detail, but imagine the rest. In ancient Egypt, the priests watched for the star Sirius to rise at dawn, heralding the annual flood of the Nile and the renewal of life. In ancient China, royal astronomers mapped the sky into mansions and markets, seeing the emperor's court mirrored in the heavens with dragons and celestial officials among the stars. Hindu sages in India divided the zodiac into lunar mansions and preserved astronomical knowledge in Sanskrit texts. Indigenous peoples across Africa, Australia, and the Americas crafted their own stellar myths, from the seven sisters of the Pleiades to the great hunter Orion, teaching moral lessons and encoding knowledge of seasons in their night sky tales. The tapestry of star lore spans every latitude and every age, yet it all speaks to the same human longing to understand and connect with the universe. From these far-flung corners of the world, a realization emerges. All of us, everywhere on Earth and throughout history, have been gazing up at one single sky. The stars that watched over a Polynesian canoe on the Pacific are the same stars that twinkled above a Viking longship on the North Sea and shone down on an Inca farmer in the Andes. Each culture turned that shared canopy of lights into its own unique tapestry of meanings. In one place, a pattern becomes Maui's fishhook. In another, it is seen as Thor's wagon, and in yet another, as part of a great celestial llama. The constellations may differ, the stories may seem worlds apart, yet the impulse behind them is the same, a human impulse as natural as breathing. No matter the land or language, people look to the sky for guidance and reassurance. When lost at sea or in trackless deserts, they found orientation by the heavens. When the time came to sow seeds, or travel, or prepare for winter, they watched the seasonal rising of stars to act at the right moment. When they felt small under the immense vault of night, they populated it with gods, heroes, animals, and ancestors to feel a sense of familiarity and companionship in the dark. In the stars, humanity found a canvas to project our hopes and fears, our curiosity and creativity. Think of the parallels. The Polynesians followed stars to find new homes across the ocean. The Vikings followed a star to find new coasts across the Atlantic. The Inca read the stars to know when the rains would come for their crops. Separated by vast distances and not knowing of each other, they nevertheless were engaged in very similar practices, driven by similar needs. Each developed remarkable expertise, whether it was memorizing hundreds of star courses, devising sunstones and horizon markers, or creating calendars that tied the sky to the seasons. In doing so, they were practicing a kind of science, an empirical observation of nature, long before the formal tools of science existed. They proved that with careful attention and a bit of imagination, the sky could indeed be turned into a reliable guidebook for life on Earth. Yet it wasn't all practical. There was always wonder, always a search for meaning. How moving it is to realize that a humble shepherd in the Andes and a weathered sailor in the North Atlantic might both have looked up at the Milky Way and pondered what lies beyond, or whispered a prayer to be kept safe through the night. One may have envisioned a pathway for souls among those stars, the other, a bridge to the realm of gods. Both, in their own way, sought connection with something greater. The calm, eternal presence of the stars reassured them that the world had order, that there were stories bigger than their own daily struggles. Our journey through ancient star lore has also shown how knowledge and myth blend together. In antiquity, there was often no hard line between astronomy and mythology. They were part of one seamless understanding of the cosmos. The sky was at once a clock, a map, and a grand storybook. It taught when to navigate and when to harvest, and it also taught where we came from and where we might go after death. The vault of heaven was the dome of a giant's skull to one people, the underside of a great tent to another, or the face of a god sprinkled with glowing embers. The scientific facts we know today, that stars are burning suns, that Earth is a sphere orbiting one such star, do not diminish the old stories. If anything, knowing what we know now makes the ancient stories even more poignant. As we reflect on how our ancestors, with no telescopes or precise instruments, succeeded in understanding so much just by observing patiently and thinking symbolically. All those diverse tales and techniques are a heritage we share. Our modern world, illuminated by electric lights and defined by digital screens, sometimes makes it easy to forget the night sky. Many children grow up unable to see the Milky Way due to city lights, and the stars that were once constant companions to our ancestors now often hide behind the glow of urban life. But if you venture out to a dark place and let your eyes adjust, the same resplendent cosmic vista reveals itself, a view virtually unchanged from the time of the ancients. Stand on a quiet shore, or a mountain, or a desert on a clear evening, and you will see, essentially, what the Polynesian navigator saw on the open Pacific, what the Norse sailor saw off the coast of Greenland, and what the Inca priest saw from the heights of Machu Picchu. In those moments, time folds in on itself. The centuries between us and them fall away. You might even find those old stories stirring in your mind. Perhaps you'll trace the fishhook of Maui setting in the west, or find Polaris and think of the lodestar guiding a longship, or catch the shape of a dark emu in the Milky Way's dust, just as the Aboriginal Australians do. And remember that the sky is more than just points of light. Ultimately, whether we picture a canoe, a longship, or a llama, we are all under one sky, and it has bound us together more deeply than we might realize. The patterns we have imagined above helped build patterns in our lives below, patterns of travel, of agriculture, of ceremony, and of community. When we share our star lore, we find surprising resonances across cultures. A Greek or Egyptian stargazer might not have known anything of a Polynesian wayfinder, yet both could point out the Pleiades on a spring dawn and feel the turning of the year. A navigator in the Indian Ocean and one in the Pacific could both look at the rising of Orion's belt and know east from west. Even cultures with no contact often arrived at strikingly analogous ideas. Aboriginal Australians see a dark emu in the Milky Way's dusty band, uncannily similar to the Inca's dark llama. The constellations' names and stories might differ. One culture's scorpion is another's fishhook, one's great bear is another's wagon. But the act of stargazing creates a silent kinship across humanity. As our exploration of cosmic origins comes to an end, it's fitting to dwell on that universality. We began with curiosity about how different peoples saw the stars, and we end with an appreciation of how much they all shared in spirit. There is a profound comfort in knowing that wherever humans roamed, across unforgiving oceans, through trackless forests, over windswept plains and towering mountains, they carried the stars with them in their minds and hearts. The night sky was the first universal library of human knowledge, open to everyone, everywhere. Each culture contributed its verses to that library in the form of lore and learning. We are the heirs to all of those stories. When we identify the constellations today, we are echoing voices from thousands of years ago. The name Polaris, or North Star, carries echoes of Norse sailors and others before them. The constellation Scorpius carries echoes of Polynesian navigators and Greek myth-tellers alike. Even modern astronomy, for all its advanced technology, still nods to ancient knowledge every night. Astronomers align their telescopes using stars whose positions were first charted by sky watchers long ago, and spacecraft navigate using star patterns as reference, much like the mariners of old. The path of scientific discovery was paved by these early observations and narratives. In a sense, our species has always been trying to find its place in the universe, both literally and figuratively. The literal journey involved using the stars to map and travel our world. The figurative journey involved using the stars to understand our purpose and destiny. Both journeys have been running in parallel since the dawn of civilization, and they continue today. We have mapped the stars with extraordinary precision now, and even sent probes out beyond our solar system. Yet when we confront the vast night sky, we still feel that same awe and yearning for meaning that our ancestors did. Now imagine, finally, that you are lying down under a clear night sky, maybe on the deck of a gently rocking canoe, or on a quiet hillside, or perhaps on your back porch, with the city lights miraculously gone. The stars spread out above you, thick and luminous. The air is cool, and a hush has fallen, as if the world itself is listening. In this moment, you feel connected to every human who has ever stared at the stars in wonder. You can almost hear the whispers of ancient storytellers in the breeze. Perhaps you find yourself humming a gentle tune, not knowing its origin, a Polynesian navigator's chant, or a Viking sailor's song, or an Andean farmer's lullaby to the llama, somehow all harmonizing across time. The constellations above are no longer just scientific objects. They are companions filled with character and memory. Picture for a moment those distant figures under the shared sky. The Polynesian wayfinder guiding his canoe by the rising of Venus on a warm ocean horizon. The Viking helmsman keeping his longship true by the fixed glow of the North Star. The Inca priest quietly tracing a llama in the Milky Way's cloak. Though they never met, they are kindred spirits across time, each finding wisdom and comfort in the same sky. We too are part of that lineage whenever we look up and wonder. Under one sky, humanity has spun countless narratives, yet all those narratives together form a single epic, an epic of curiosity, ingenuity, and imagination. We end our journey with a sense of calm and continuity. The stars that guided our forebears still shine on us. The patterns they saw are still there, inviting us to see anew and to add our own chapter to the cosmic story. As the night sky stretches above, filled with ancient light, it tells countless stories. Yet ultimately, it also tells one, the story of humanity's enduring wonder and connection to the stars. And so, as this exploration of ancient starlight comes to a gentle close, we bid farewell to our guides, the navigators, the storytellers, the wise ones of old. Their voices echo in the night wind, reminding us to always look up, to wonder, and to find our own place among the stars. Safe journey, and good night.